very good morning to you, by the way. Morning, Glory, with me, Mark Dolan.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
How realistic do you think a ceasefire is this week?
There's a very good chance that we'll have a settlement, an agreement of some kind.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, top of the morning to you. I am Mark Dolan. This is Morning Glory, a big 4 hours to come, including, it's the understanding of Talk that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the financial wizard known as Rachel from Accounts, is considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Would that be the final nail in the coffin of this Labour government? And is anyone taking the Chancellor seriously when she blames Brexit, the vote for which happened almost a decade ago, for her tanking of the economy? I'll get the views of one of the biggest names in British finance. Also this morning, Plaid Cymru win the Caerphilly by-election in Wales. Reform UK were hoping to take that seat. What went wrong? I'll be asking their chairman, Dr. David Bull. Meanwhile, demonstrating that they couldn't organise a drinks party in a brewery, the government's failure to deliver a national inquiry into the grooming gangs is now set to be delayed into next year, as the front-runner to become chairman has quit, with 5 previous victims now resigning over concerns about the scope of the inquiry, and with one victim claiming that the top minister in charge of this, Jess Phillips, has called her a liar in the House of Commons. Will these women ever get justice? We're speaking to some top names on that, plus a very snappy Dolan's dispatch at 8 a.m. Meanwhile, junior doctors have announced a 5-day strike over renewed pay demands, even though they've already received an inflation-busting 5.4% in this financial year. As public sympathy for medics diminishes, particularly as they wait for treatment and give up any hope of a GP appointment this side of Christmas, have the ultra-left-wing British Medical Association bitten off more than they can chew? Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to smash the gangs have been smashed to pieces with abject failure in regards to our one-in, one-out arrangement with France. If Britain, right, one in, one out, if Britain was a nightclub, we'd be shut down by now. At current rates, it's now likely that 250,000 people, 300,000 people, will enter the country illegally in the course of this parliament. 300,000 people. Is this now a national emergency? I'll be asking the fearless Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, who believes that he's got the answer to ultimately stop the boats. The Tories have turned right-wing, finally, ditching net zero, understanding that taxes are too high and wanting to have border control. But is it too little too late? I'll be asking their deputy chairman. And how about this? It's gone viral in the last 24 hours. An image of a white man in a very smart suit harassing a woman on a train in an article for the Mirror newspaper has gone viral. Are the public being gaslit over who exactly perpetrates harassment of women in our society? Meanwhile, woke Oxford University are accused of social engineering, as it's revealed successful candidates of colour who fall short of the required grades are twice as likely to be shown leniency in the administration process of getting into the university. Is this positive discrimination for underrepresented groups or divisive madness? Meanwhile, the King visits Rome and prays with the Pope But was he praying that his brother, Prince Andrew, leaves the 30-bedroom royal lodge and gives up his remaining titles? I'll be asking the man who knows the monarch intimately well, and that is his former butler, Grant Harold, later in the show. And in a Morning Glory exclusive, Dublin on fire. Are the Irish waking up to the full economic and societal cost of illegal immigration? Is Ireland now a warning to the rest of the world? I'll be speaking to a furious Irish politician who's not happy about the direction of her country. She joins us after 8. A busy show. My priority is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. My number is 0344 499 1000. Book your place on the show right now. Tommy is taking your calls. And you can text the word talk in your message to 87222. If you're in a hurry and getting ready for work, drop me a voice message. What do they call it, Christian? It's very fancy. There you go. They call it, the youngsters, they call it a voice note. You can hear us on DAB+, in-app and online. You can watch the show by searching Talk on YouTube. This is Morning Glory. Let's get to work. And let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. And we start with the Daily Telegraph newspaper. King and Pope bridge 500-year divide with a single amen. That is the King and the Pope. Of course, the King visiting Rome at the moment and taking to the knee to pray with the leader of the Catholic Church. Also, stop the show trials for veterans. Starmer told to reinstate the Legacy Act in full after Soldier F was cleared of the Bloody Sunday killings. So Keir Starmer has been told to stop the show trials of Trouble's veterans after a former paratrooper was cleared of murdering civilians on Bloody Sunday. The idea that people that were involved in keeping British citizens safe during the Troubles should now face legal action and potentially jail is one of the most egregious things that could have happened to the military in the history of this country. Andrew thinks King wants him out to give Royal Lodge to the Queen. And MOD scrambles to fill a £2 billion black hole despite cash boost. Times newspaper now, judge clears the only Bloody Sunday soldier tried for murder. Grooming inquiry may be off until next year. That is the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. And China and India slash imports of Russian oil. Daily Mail now, showbiz exclusive. Is Claudia waltzing away from Strictly to become the new Wogan? I think it's very bad news for the BBC, this. Strictly Come Dancing, so many scandals, and now they've lost both of their hosts. Is this the beginning of the end for the BBC's flagship entertainment show? And also, after elderly ex-para hounded over Bloody Sunday killings more than 50 years ago is cleared of all charges, campaigners demand now end the witch hunt. Daily Express, we are strictly done dancing. That's Tess Daly and Claudia Winkleman, who have quit the BBC show. The Sun newspaper, Tess and Claude's secret pact to quit. I'll be honest, it's not a great vote of confidence in Strictly, is it? And it's not a confidence vote in the BBC either. Guardian newspaper, Reeves discussing an increase to income tax in November budget. And we won't bow to US pressure, says Vladimir Putin. iNewspaper, Reeves in talks on 1p income tax rise, risking Labour manifesto pledge to fill her £30 billion black hole. And the Daily Mirror, King and Pope pray together, hand of history. Let's get reaction to the big stories of the day in the company of a good friend of mine, the editor of Spiked Online, which is one of the finest political websites in the country, Tom Slater. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Mark. How are you doing?
Listen, it's very good to see you. Very, very well. Lots of stories to get through. What's the one that caught your eye in today's papers?
Well, it's one thing that actually isn't in the papers, actually, but you mentioned it at the top, which is the by-election in Caerphilly in Wales, which everyone was sort of had their eye on as potentially reform, really laying down their marker.
Yeah.
They came second in the end, Plaid Cymru won, as you say. But I think because of the fact that they sort of defied the predictions and didn't win the seat, we're forgetting that this is the first time Labour have lost in that part of the world for 100 years. So it is another reminder that the wheels are coming off this government, even if reform didn't win in this particular
Does it also tell us, with the growing popularity of the Greens in England, that whilst the right are on the rise in the form of Reform UK, and of course the Tories have shifted right themselves, that the left are on the rise too?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And I think it's one thing that is often slightly undercounted in our discussions of this. I mean, it's still going to be a real problem for Labour because they're seeing their votes split in so many different directions in different parts of the country. So, of course, they are losing votes to the Greens in your Bristols and your Brightons, but in Wales, it's certainly to the benefit of Plaid Cymru, who have been putting some pretty decent numbers up, and they're very much, it's off the back of the collapse of Labour. So, as you say, it's not purely the right are in the ascendancy, even though I think the vote on the right side of politics seems a bit more united than on the left side.
Yeah, will it become, do you think, by the time of the next election, a battle between sort of left-wing populism and populism on the right?
Well, it's certainly shaping up that way. I mean, I think we should keep it in perspective. The Greens, even if they have a very good couple of years, we're not really talking about them properly challenging the Labour Party, displacing them or anything like that. But I think it would at very least force the Labour Party to sound a bit more like a Zach Polanski, then maybe Keir Starmer would have been comfortable doing.
Well, that's right. I mean, Zach Polanski has been lampooned in some quarters for some of his remarks on those sort of political debate shows and some of his own videos. But the guy's making noise, and that is the currency of modern politics, isn't it?
No, absolutely, and that's one thing that you really do have to hand to him. I mean, the fact that their membership has soared to 100,000. I mean, this is really significant. And yes, the message is terrible. And it's absurd, and it's all kinds of shades in between. But nevertheless, there is a constituency for that. There are people who want a kind of mix of recycling and Israelophobia, which he's offering up on stage.
It's a lovely, heady mix. I'll be honest with you. It seems that they very rarely mention the environment. And I, back in the day, I remember the Greens, and it was all about basically, recycling and the ozone layer back in the day, showing my age with that. And but now clearly the Green Party, is masquerading as a sort of environmental campaign group. But really, this is socialism in a green mask, isn't it?
Well, they call it eco-populism, don't they? That's sort of Zach Polanski's phrase, which I think is a bit of a contradiction in terms. I just don't think there's much that's very popular beyond a small coterie of people about the kind of hair shirt, let's make energy bills so much more expensive. You've got to be pretty well off to appreciate that message, so it's not particularly populist. But I think it's one of those things where clearly there is a audience for it. Again, it's not necessarily a huge one, but if the Greens, say, edged up closer to 10% of the vote, that could be hugely damaging to Starmer. They might not win a lot of seats, but they'll deprive Labour of their seats in various parts of the country. I think could easily be that situation.
Most definitely. How about this? King and Pope pray together. Hand of history. Symbolic service at Sistine Chapel is the first in 500 years. Do you think this is an important step on the part of the King to have prayers with the Pope? I mean,
it is historic, and the coming together of the two churches, as it were, and it's being kind of written up particularly in the context of a sense in the UK and other parts of Western Europe that Christianity is having a bit of a revival at the moment, and it's a tremendous image, if nothing else. Whether or not what this kind of means going forward for the respective denominations, I'm not sure, but yeah, tremendous moment.
Now, let me tell you that Reform UK have not won the Caerphilly by-election. They were not dead certs to win it, but they were hoping they might take it in a political upset. It hasn't happened. Have they fluffed their lines? And it's the understanding of Morning Glory that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the financial wizard known as Rachel from Accounts, is considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Is that the final nail in the coffin of this Labour government? We'll do that next.
government. It's a crisis for the thousands of victims who've been through this, Rakib. Where do they go from here, do you think?
Well, I think there needs to be three key things that the Labour government has to do if it wants to shore up public confidence in the national statutory inquiry into grooming gangs, but ultimately restore trust among the victims and survivors of such heinous sexual crimes. I think one is that I think that Jess Phillips needs to be fired as safeguarding minister.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sean in Gloucester has messaged the show. Welcome to Morning Glory. Sean says, good morning, Mark. Every day I think this Labour government can't get any worse. How wrong am I? Step up Rachel Thieves. This numerically illiterate imbecile is systematically bankrupting us with stupid policies, open borders and driving the wealthy out. It feels deliberate, as how can anyone get everything so wrong 100% of the time? Tony says, hello, Mark. Labour were obliterated in Caerphilly on just 11% in a once Labour stronghold. Tony, thank you for that. Well, let's have a look at this, because it's the understanding of Morning Glory that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the financial wizard known as Rachel from Accounts, Britain's first woman Chancellor, because, of course, her gender is so important, she's considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Let's have a listen to her promising not to on many occasions.
This is a once-in-a-parliament budget. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
We don't need to come back for more. We're not going to have to come back and ever do a budget like this again.
So never again will I have to do a budget like I did in October. There is no need to come back with another budget like this. We never need to do that again.
5 minutes later.
There are tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but
Nicely put together. We've got the receipts, folks. Rachel from Accounts is in big trouble. She's got this looming November budget, a £30 million black hole. And Tom Slater, who's with me in the studio, is this of her making, or is it all the fault of the Tories and Brexit?
Exactly. Nothing is Rachel Reeves' fault, nothing is Labour's fault, as we all know. But how they ever got themselves into this position, I don't know. They came in, they said, we're going to have a laser-like focus on growth. Growth has been pretty much non-existent the entire time they've been in there, and as a result of it, they're just constantly having to kind of shuffle the spreadsheet around to, you know, fill black holes, which, broadly speaking, are often kind of in response to kind of external geopolitical factors, but also they're making the problem worse by making it so much more difficult to employ people, all of the kind of employment rights things which are coming down the track. So it's one of those things where they now, I think, are going to have to take responsibility for this, particularly because this is a clear-cut breach of their manifesto commitment and something that they were clinging on to until about 5 years ago. So it makes them look dishonest as well as incompetent. And I think that's a bad mix for them.
Most definitely. She promised not to raise income tax, VAT and national insurance on people's payslips. Yeah. So what they've done is a rather stealth-like national insurance raid on employers, which many argue is a jobs tax because, you know, people will be punished with less pay rises, layoffs and all the rest of it, lower investments. It's a big problem, isn't it? But she's got to find the money from somewhere, and I think that the Treasury have realised that having this sort of salami slice approach where you take money from different individual groups and sectors is in some ways more politically damaging because you annoy the pensioners and you annoy the farmers and annoy aspirational families who send their kids to private school. And maybe she's made a political calculation that actually just tear that plaster off quickly, have the income tax rise and basically balance the books.
I mean, I think in a way, if she was to do this now is the time to do it. We are still 4 years out from an election. You've already kind of shredded your political capital in so many other ways. You might as well kind of do this, take the lumps for it, and then hope that by the time the next election rolls around, the story has changed. Maybe some of the parties that were challenging you have fallen away a little bit.
Maybe she gets growth.
Maybe there are some positive indications.
I mean, pigs can fly.
Exactly. Who knows? Stranger things have happened, but we shall see. So I think that's the sense, is that if we're going to do this, we'll do it it now. And you're absolutely right. The other thing about those measures that they were taking across different parts of the economy or different parts of the welfare budget is that it just was never going to raise enough. It was going to cost you huge amounts politically because you look like you're allowing pensioners to freeze or you're doing this or that. But at the same time, the amount of money that we're talking about was never that huge. Similarly with the whole wealth taxes that certain parts of the Labour Party are very keen to go after, there's just not enough super rich people to squeeze. So that things like this, where you put a penny on income tax across the board, is a genuinely big revenue raiser, but it's obviously politically toxic, particularly at a time when the cost of living is still biting.
And to be fair to Sir Keir Starmer, which I don't like to do too often, he's on record as saying that wealth taxes are fantasy economics, which I think is very responsible of him to say that, because it's so tempting for the left to re-enter their comfort zone and talk about taxing the rich until the pips squeak. But we know it's sort of the history of capitalism that it just doesn't work. You've got the famous Laffer curve, haven't you, whereby when taxes get to a certain point, they become subject to the law of diminishing returns. They go high and then less comes in. And that's where we're at. We're at the very peak of the Laffer curve. In fact, we're hovering above the Laffer curve at the moment, aren't we? And my viewers and listeners are struggling as a result. Do you think that this is going to happen? Do you think she will tear up the manifesto pledge now?
I think she's been indicating that that's what she was going to do for a long time. You saw that interview with Sky News where she's kind of let the cat out of the bag. It's been clear that she was going to have to do something. And I think the timing is probably the thing that seals it. Get it out of the way now is probably their thinking. But I just don't. I don't think they realise how badly this is going to go down as well. I mean, the story of this government is them being surprised by how unpopular their policies are. I dare say, economically speaking, this could be the one that really causes trouble for them.
Is it fair to say that a picture is emerging of a party that didn't have a plan for power?
No, absolutely. I mean, they tried. I think there was a level of naivety on the part of this government. There was a sense that the Tories just made such a hash of everything because they're bad, craven people, but because we're Labour and we're nice people and we get along with the civil service, we're going to get a tune out of them. It's going to be fantastic. And then also they kind of outsourced the planning to Sue Gray, and we'll know how that turned out. So I think it's quite clear that they really underestimated what governing the country, particularly at this time, particularly with how dysfunctional the British state is, was actually going to be.
Was it a poison chalice, though, winning that last election? I mean, it didn't seem like even Rishi Sunak wanted to remain Prime Minister. He must be the first Prime Minister in history that deliberately shortened his time in office by having that July election, which was basically a turkey voting for Christmas. Are we letting the Tories off the hook here? Labour inherited, didn't they, an almighty deficit, an almighty economic mess. Are we being, too harsh on Labour for the problems made by the Tories?
I mean, the Tories did make an absolute dog's dinner of their 14 years in power. They had a chance to turn it around with Brexit. We all know how that worked out. Yes, there were external factors as well. Everyone forgets about COVID, everyone forgets about Ukraine when we talk about the economic picture. But at the same time, the Tories made that worse. They did lock us down. They did do all of these policies that one would never expect them to pursue. I think the thing with Labour is, even though they weren't around for a lot of that stuff, they certainly supported all of it. They certainly wanted it to go further. They wanted to immiserate us even more than the Tories did during COVID. So there's plenty of blame to go around.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that when we talk about our broken country, the elephant in the room is the COVID response. I try not to go on about it because people know I'm very passionate about what I consider to be the biggest public health mistake in history, which is lockdowns, plus vaccine tyranny, which was illiberal and scientific madness. But the bottom line is, that is how we got into this situation, that we printed £500 billion worth of cash in order to pay healthy people to stay at home for a virus that was predominantly non-fatal. But we are where we are. We've got other fish to fry as well in the papers today, Tom. Now end the witch hunt. Furious veterans, write the Daily Mail, demanded last night that Labour halts the witch hunts against them after a paratrooper was cleared of Bloody Sunday shootings. Now, these, of course, are soldiers who served in Northern Ireland in order to keep Brits safe during the Troubles, who have faced legal action and potential jail time for quite simply doing their jobs. What's your view on this whole story?
I mean, it's telling, isn't it? So the quote here from Judge Patrick Lynch at Belfast Crown Court in relation to this particular case of Soldier F said that the evidence fell well short. It was clear that the kind of statements that the prosecution was based on were, in his words, serially untruthful. And I think it's just allowed so much more this whole debacle has just allowed so much more sort of poison to exist in this particular issue. I think what you need to see is on kind of both sides of that conflict a kind of a desire to just move on, to not pursue these cases, to allow things to move to the next stage, because otherwise it's just going to continue to throw up cases like this and continue to open very old wounds, I dare say.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, it's just such an injustice, and it makes you wonder, you know, who would be a soldier, who would be a police officer, because it seems, based upon recent history, that if you go about doing your job, you're going to face consequences. There'll be an inquiry. There could even be some kind of punishment. You could lose your job or even face jail time. It's not great, is it? A quick word on the BBC's flagship entertainment show, The Daily Express. I know that showbiz is your area of expertise, Tom Slater, and you are the unofficial showbiz correspondent of Spiked Online, as well as the editor. Let's have a look at the Daily Express. We are strictly done dancing, and the drama continues on Celebrity Traitors, with 3 more faithfuls leaving. The Sun, scandal hits Strictly in crisis. Tess and Claude's secret pact to quit. The issue is that the BBC is desperate for my viewers and listeners to pay the licence fee and wants to justify itself. And one of the ways it does that is it points to Strictly and says, look, millions of people watch this show, about 7 million people a week. This is an example of what the BBC does best. Well, it's been beset by scandal after scandal, and it's now lost both of its hosts.
I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? The one thing that they could point to as a sort of jewel in the crown is the thing that, again, is in turmoil. I mean, it is one scandal after another. It was, you know, this dancer was bullying, and then it was you'll have political scandals because they'd, you know, pick someone like Tom Skinner, which would upset the Guardian, as if that made any difference to who was watching. And now you're actually losing not one but two, both of your hosts. There's just nothing the BBC can't turn to ashes, it seems like, even what was, until 5 minutes ago, a clear-cut success story for them.
Most definitely. Listen, more front pages to come. And will the victims of the grooming gangs ever get justice under a government that didn't want an inquiry in the first place? We'll discuss that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, listen, will the victims of the grooming gangs ever get justice under a Labour administration that didn't want a national inquiry in the first place? Here's the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, speaking on the matter.
This inquiry, in direct answer to your question, must go where the evidence takes it, and I'll be absolutely clear about that. And if that's questions of ethnicity, that's questions of the role of public officials, if it's questions of assumptions that were made that shouldn't have been made, all of that needs to be uncovered. No stone will be left unturned here.
Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, concerns that the government really are asleep at the wheel when it comes to delivering justice for the victims of the grooming gangs. What's your view on this?
Oh, I think it was always going to unravel, because this was a public inquiry that, as you rightly say, Mark, the Labour Party didn't want to hold. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Keir Starmer was accusing people calling for one of these as boarding a far-right bandwagon. So should we really be surprised that it's starting to unravel in this way? I mean, it's particularly unseemly because of the fact that survivors, victims of the grooming gangs themselves, are being thrown under the bus. They were appointed to this panel. They were going to take part in good faith. First of all, there was all these issues over who the chair was going to be, concerns that it would be someone from the police or social services, which for obvious reasons would be a bit of a conflict of interest.
Because they're culpable.
Absolutely. And then you had this, we got wind that they were trying to essentially kind of broaden the remit of the inquiry so much that it would take in kind of all forms of child sexual abuse, which is not to say that's not important, but the reason the grooming gangs has been such an issue is because people want to ignore this specific type of abuse because of the fact that there were quote-unquote cultural sensitivities because the perpetrators were disproportionately Pakistani Muslim. And then to see Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, in the House of Commons say that claims that they were trying to dilute the inquiry were untrue, basically saying these victims were lying, and then didn't take long for a lot of people in the media to find the texts and find the emails which proved that they weren't lying. I mean, from top to bottom, it's made a already horrendous situation that little bit worse.
Do you think Jess Phillips is not long for this world as the safeguarding minister?
I mean, it's one of those things, she's kind of ridden it out just about this week. Keir Starmer has given her full confidence, which maybe is a sign that maybe she is on the way out. But I just don't see how she can have anything to do with this inquiry anymore, which, as the safeguarding minister, you think would be a bit of a problem. I think she's incredibly defensive because she's a great example of how the Labour Party has approached this whole issue, which they think when it comes to women, girls, protection against sexual violence, that they've got the moral high ground. The grooming gang scandal, because it happened in so many Labour areas, because the Labour Party have refused to kind of digest this scandal at any level, it completely robs them of that status, and therefore they get very prickly and defensive when that's pointed out to them. And I think Jess Phillips is a good example of that.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because figures within the Labour Party, within the Labour movement, they find racism everywhere. Okay, incredibly focused on skin colour in every aspect of life, and yet actually they've ignored the racist nature of these crimes because, you know, there's an argument to be made that the grooming gang's actions were racially aggravated given the fact that young, vulnerable white girls were targeted.
No, absolutely. It's something that you see in the stories, the horrific case studies that we've all read about in the newspapers, where there seems to be this process whereby because they were seen as white young girls, because they were seen as kind of other, because they were seen as impious and unreligious and so on and so forth, that you know, provides a kind of justification, a sick justification for engaging in this kind of depraved sexual violence. And it's fascinating, you saw there with Keir Starmer when he was speaking to the media, he can only refer to that part of it euphemistically, questions of ethnicity. And I think it's again another reminder that Labour does not really have the minerals to talk about this issue, because partly it's their own kind of political correctness and it just makes them feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry, but this is not about your feelings. But also they see it as a kind of electoral calculation. They're worried about the British Muslim vote. And what an insult it is to those voters that they think they're going to be put off voting for a political party because they're going after paedophiles too vigorously. I mean, it's absurd, but that's the nature of the Labour Party, I suppose.
Most definitely. On the economy, Betty is not happy. She's messaged Morning Glory and says, "Good morning, Mark and Talk viewers. HMRC confirmed 1% pay 33% of all UK taxes, as 1% of the population pay 33% of all UK taxes. The majority of civil and public service workers are not working a full week since they got pay rises. I'd change all the tax laws. Flat 25% rates on all income and revenue, including benefits, all get same tax allowance, and you get expenses on all items you don't take from the state. It would fix the country tomorrow and force 5 million of the 10 million off benefits." Betty for Chancellor. Thank you for that, Betty. How about this from Sean on Rachel Rees. Rachel from Accounts. "If the woman who promised last year's punishment budget was a one-off, and wouldn't happen again, then it does again this year. Where do they go next year? £8 billion extra from raising income tax will be swallowed up by debt interest in a month. Sean in Bridlington, thank you for that. Tony says, Mark, it's not just Rachel from Accounts that speaks with forked tongue. Pre-election, Never Hear Keir also spoke with forked tongue by promising not a penny more on council tax. Well, it is definitely an administration that seems to renege on its promises. Not that that's unusual for politicians. One thing that this incoming Labour government said they would fix, Tom Slater, is industrial action. But the latest we got now, the developing story, which is that doctors have announced that junior doctors are going to have a 5-day strike. Is public support for medics beginning to wane?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one thing that has been striking about the last few months, is that generally speaking, particularly where the health service is concerned, and oftentimes where strike action is concerned, generally the public are often quite supportive. They understand that there have been pressures on the NHS. They understand that in terms of pay and conditions it hasn't been great. The issue with doctors, there's always a slightly less sympathy than there would be with nurses or paramedics, because people know that whilst things might not be as rosy as they used to be for being a doctor starting out, you're going to go good in the end. You're going to make your money. You will be okay. But I think they've really tested that patience to oblivion now. I think even you pick it up with people who work within the health service who aren't doctors are starting to think that they are really just sort of taking the Michael with this one. And I think public patience has run out. I think the problem is they're just a much more ideological set of medics now who are really pushing this, not willing to back down. And it's caused a huge problem for Labour, because they gave in originally, and now they've come back for more, which was always going to happen.
Yes, and the British Medical Association sounds like a very grand and venerated organisation, doesn't it? The British Medical Association. That's the organisation that stops my mum dying from cancer and is going to get my son's broken leg fixed. But the British Medical Association is a misnomer, because what it is, it's a left-wing trade union, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's gone in a kind of decidedly kind of Corbynista direction in recent years.
Which many doctors aren't happy about, many nurses aren't happy about.
No, exactly. And the BMA historically as well, it's always kind of primarily looked out for its own interests. It opposed the founding of the NHS because they likened it to communism and fascism, I believe, because they were worried it would hurt doctors and hit them in the pocket. So they've always been looking out for themselves.
They've been on a journey, haven't they?
They have been on a bit of a journey, but I think the key thread is always looking out for themselves, even if it's at the expense of patients.
Yeah, and of course that's unions, go figure. But this is a dent for Labour, because each administration with its own ideology can be seen to have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And you would have thought that this Labour government would have the ear of the unions and be able to negotiate these things and make sure that we don't have any strikes anymore. But we have. It's just as bad as it was under the Conservatives.
No, absolutely. And a lot of these strikes will reflect genuine things that have gone wrong. I mean, I think the BMA have tested everyone's patience to oblivion, as I say, but there have been people across the economy and across the public sector who have experienced real terms pay cuts. There is an issue. People understand that, but at the same time you need a broader plan to do that in such a way that doesn't result in a load of strike action and also doesn't result in you writing cheques that you can't afford to write. And with just the Labour Party, again, I think they had this idea that because they obviously are traditionally the party of trade unionism, that they would just be able to sort these things out, hammer them out. Governing is a lot more difficult than all that, and I think that's one thing they've been forced to realise in the past few weeks.
Most definitely. What about David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, for the next few minutes anyway? Migrant proves that 1 in, 1 out works. This is, of course, the Deputy PM, who has said detaining the 1 in, 1 out migrant who was caught trying to slip back into Britain shows progress. He said that the fact that the unnamed Iranian had been identified via his biometric data and could now be deported again showed that improvements had been made in the migrant return system. Are you buying that?
Not in the slightest. I mean, he's trying to say that it's a success story, that this Iranian chap managed to come into the country, was then deported, managed to come in again and be deported again. So 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 1 out. If that was the plan, then fantastic,
isn't it?
It is. This is absurd. I mean, we all know that this plan, this deal with France, whereby you'll exchange one illegal migrant for a legitimate asylum seeker, was never going to touch the sides anyway, even if it was successful. They were talking about this dealing with dozens of people rather than anything too significant. But the fact that even on its own terms it's failed, and you're having David Lammy running around trying to hail this as a success story, it just shows that they've got no credibility when it comes to controlling the border.
Well, this is Sir Keir Starmer in July announcing the 1 in, 1 out scheme with France.
It will be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
We especially have to adapt our response to Brexit.
OK, well, there you go. And that last few words there were from the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. Do Labour really care about illegal immigration? There is no serious effort to stop the boats, is there? Particularly given the scrapping of the Rwanda plan on the part of the Prime Minister, who said he would do so even if it worked.
No, which tells you everything you need to know. I think the problem is they know that electorally they have to pretend to care about it because it's become the issue that's roiled the country all of the past summer. I don't think they, as individuals, care about it that much. It doesn't really touch their lives. If those hotels aren't necessarily always in their constituencies, it's something that they can kind of keep at arm's length. I think they know that they've got to be seen to be doing something, but that's about as far as it goes. And that's why you get things like this one-in, one-out scheme. Even if it worked perfectly on its own terms, if you think of the tens of thousands of people who are now coming into this country illegally via small boat, it would barely affect those numbers at all. And they just, again, particularly because this is a government run by human rights lawyers, Keir Starmer, a human rights lawyer, Lord Herman, the Attorney General, a human rights lawyer, they're like constitutionally incapable of doing the things that would be necessary to deal with this issue, ECHR, Refugee Convention. So as long as you're not willing to go there, you're just talking about massaging the figures a little bit. You've got to get to the root of the problem, and they're not willing to do that.
Well, yeah, here on Morning Glory, we've been crunching the numbers, and it's likely that upwards of 1/3 people will enter the country illegally in the course of this Parliament, which surely, gifts power to any party that isn't Labour.
Of course, and who couldn't see this coming? I mean, even in the election, there was a sense in which the boats were kind of holding back for a few weeks to see how things panned out. And what people in Calais were openly saying, when Labour's in power now we're going to make the move, because it's they knew that they were going to get a softer touch. They knew that the first thing Keir Starmer was going to do was scrap the Rwanda plan. They knew ultimately that this government doesn't really care about this issue. They think it's just something that's been got up by Nigel Farage, and people have stupidly run along with it, even though it doesn't really matter. So this is one of those issues among many that will really be... I just don't see how they can retain any credibility on it.
Now, let me tell you that woke Oxford University have been accused of social engineering, with news that underperforming potential undergraduates are getting in based upon their skin colour. Is that positive discrimination or divisive madness? We'll discuss that next.
people driving electric cars. And of course, that means fewer people filling their tanks up with petrol. And petrol, the levies on petrol, as your viewers will know, because they're the ones paying it, it's so expensive. That money's going into government. When government loses that money because more people are driving EVs, we do need to think about what the alternative measure looks like. What we want to get to through this cheaper energy commitment is that you make electricity so cheap that your viewers are saying, get me an electric car as quickly as possible.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, will the victims of the grooming gangs ever get justice? That's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. And I'm delighted to say that joining us live on the show is the chairman of Reform UK. Very shortly, that is Dr. David Bull. They were hoping to snatch the Caerphilly constituency in the Caerphilly by-election. It's gone to Plaid Cymru. Have they fluffed their lines? I'll be asking Dr. David Bull very shortly. But how about this from today's papers? Oxford University has been accused of social engineering because black applicants who missed their required A-level grades are more likely to be accepted than white candidates. Over the last 5 years, 16% of black UK undergraduates who went to Oxford had failed to achieve the grades specified when they were offered a place, according to a Freedom of Information figure obtained by The Telegraph. Now, this is more than twice as high as the figure for white UK applicants, which is 6%, and only 2% of Chinese applicants who live in Britain were accepted after failing to perform sufficiently in their exams. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, is this important positive discrimination in order to get underrepresented groups into Oxford, or is it racism and divisive madness?
I just don't think there's ever anything positive about discrimination in these situations, and I think this is another reminder that this kind of, even if it comes from a good place, you know, even if it comes from a idea that there are certain people who otherwise wouldn't be able to gain access to this institution, they go to terrible schools, you can't expect them to achieve on the same level as someone who went to even a decent state school in a leafy area rather than some of the schools that they've been attending. The problem with this is you end up just kind of, first of all, you end up corroding the idea of merit, which I think is very fundamentally important. You're going to end up with a lot of students there who, you know, won't necessarily even be able to work out whether they got there on purely based on merit or some other consideration, a thumb was put on the scale for them.
Yeah.
And also it affects people because oftentimes when people are given that bit of a leg up, they can't progress through the institution the same way, they're more likely to drop out, which is not necessarily a good thing. I think the problem is we always want to try and kind of solve the problems of society at the point at which people enter university or enter the workplace or whatever. Surely the answer is to make sure that the schools are better, make sure that people have more access to educational attainment at the lower level rather than trying to fix all of these things at the level of elite institutions. It's just not obvious to me that it works as much as anything else.
Well, that's right, and I think Oxford fell out of the top 3 best universities in the country. That was announced a few weeks ago, and concerns obviously about the debating union, the Oxford Union, whereby the incoming president for next term is now not going to take that position given his celebration of the murder of the activist Charlie Kirk. So, you know, our elite universities, are they in something of a crisis at the moment?
I think so, and I think it's because they've not only become kind of up to their necks in woke stuff, which has roiled the university sector for a decade now. You know, these constant rows over who is allowed to speak, over, you know, well-meaning but ultimately quite murky initiatives like we're talking about from the Telegraph story here. But also it's corroded the idea of merit. That's the thing about kind of identity politics and whatever. It's always kind of geared towards the idea that the kind of usual rules that we used to apply to things are somehow wrong, they leave people out, they're somewhat unjust. But if you're Oxford University, you're an elite institution, you're supposed to be the best of the best. Without merit, you're nothing. And I think this is what part of the reason they're starting to kind of slide down these league tables and so on. They've other considerations rather than actual academic excellence have crept in to such a degree that it's starting to really corrupt the institution, I think.
Most definitely, and it's ironic that given that the forces behind this policy are leftist in their flavour and are very focused on skin colour, it's therefore ironic that the group who do the worst out of this positive discrimination are Chinese Brits, who are deeply prejudiced against, and we've seen the same in American universities as well, where Asian candidates can't get into Harvard and Yale. Why? Because they're just too bright.
No, exactly. They're too hard-working. Their grades are too good. I mean, it's really, really telling kind of story, because the fact that particularly British Chinese pupils really perform incredibly well, even if they come from pretty poor backgrounds. There is just a kind of cultural validation of hard work and educational attainment and whatever, which isn't, across all communities perfectly distributed. But you then get into a really grim situation where, under the banner of anti-racism, as we've seen in America, you actively discriminate against a minority group, which is what we could be, kind of fumbling our way towards in this country as well at this point.
Let's just have the best people. Let's have merit, as you said. And in the workplace, let's have the best person for the job. Wouldn't that be great? Because that means that if you're a person of colour and then you're the boss, you've done very well, and you haven't been given a leg up, because no one wants a leg up, because there's no victim out there. What we need is equality of opportunity.
Absolutely.
And apart from that, once you've given everyone an equal chance, all bets are off. When did the left, Tom, forget about poor people? When did that happen?
Oh, it feels like it's been quite a long time.
Because that's what they exist, surely, to be concerned about.
Yeah.
And I feel they discarded that years ago.
No, exactly.
The poor.
It's become the party of the upper middle classes, the Labour Party, for instance. The left in general, even the supposedly radical left, you're more likely to find someone who is privately educated amongst those people than you would your average reform activist these days.
Yeah.
And we all can see that. We all can see the fact that this has primarily become a kind of pearl-clutching middle-class movement which likes to pose as it's on the side of the downtrodden. Meanwhile, it's speaking in cut-glass accents and obsessed with issues that you could only be obsessed with if you had a lot of time on your hands and a fair amount of money. So it's been a historic shift away from class and towards identity politics and so on. But I think we're getting to the point where I think people will stop associating the left with class and actual uplift, and I think we will just start to think of it in precisely these terms now. It's been so long since you had an authentically pro-working class left that I think the working class in particular don't even think of them in those terms.
And I don't know whether this is too much of a brush stroke, but I think predominantly that the British working class are not woke. Okay, I think that ordinary people who work hard and get up in the morning and put a shift in, they don't think there are 100 genders.
Yep.
They don't believe in open borders. They think that's insane. Or sympathising with criminals rather than victims in criminal justice. Net zero is provably bad for poor people because it pushes up energy bills. And open borders are bad for the poor because it creates extra competition for resources that we import and depletes the nation's finances. I mean, it's just wild.
You've laid it all out there. If you think about all of the big issues of our time, whether we're talking about culturally, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about the economy, the left have found themselves on the wrong side of all of those questions where the working class are concerned. And how they unwind that, I don't know. And I think what we're going to see, actually, particularly as the Labour Party start to chase votes that are going to parties of their left, is that they're just going to kind of lean into being the party of Bristol Central, being the party of Brighton Pavilion, trying to kind of carve out that kind of territory, because I think they've realised that they've lost a lot of those voters, that they managed to claw back at the last election from more kind of Brexity working class constituencies, but they're now running very quickly in the other direction.
And the left don't get it, do they? Because they had this sort of intellectual navel-gazing in the 70s and early 80s with the election of leaders like Michael Foot. He's a very sort of intelligent man, very decent man, but a bookish metropolitan socialist, of course, and with no appeal to the wider population. Margaret Thatcher swept to power on the back of working class votes, because she said to voters, you know what, you're working class, you live in a council flat, you can make something of your life, you can be aspirational. People loved that message. Blair had a similar message, which is why he was successful. But right now, that's not where the Labour Party currently are. Are they going to wake up and smell the coffee on this?
Well, at the end of the day, sheer electoral self-interest will kick in at some point. I think they've realised that there's issues that they might want to ignore, they can't ignore them. But I think it's too little too late. I think there was a lot of complacency after the last election because the majority was so big. We all knew that was a loveless landslide. We all knew that the support was kind of very wide but quite shallow. And I think they just expected to have a slightly longer honeymoon period where they could kind of try to sort these problems out. But they haven't been given that opportunity, and I think, like I say, I think what they're probably going to end up doing is not appealing so much to the concerns of working class people, whether it's on the border or what have you. I think they're just going to be trying to chase Zach Polanski out of various different constituencies and becoming more and more irritating to those working class voters as a consequence.
It's wild. And by the way, Reform UK are going to be swept to power, I think, in 3.5 years' time on a working class and multi-ethnic vote. You heard it here first. Asylum seeker with receding hairline is a child. Judge rules. Tom, you've got a great head of hair. What a barnet you're rocking this morning.
Thank you very much.
But this poor man, right, he's literally got crow's feet. All right, he's ancient. He's hobbling around on the Zimmer frame. But according to our top court, he's a child.
This is one of those open secrets, hasn't it? The number of migrant children who were showing up in schools who looked like they could have easily fathered 8 or 9 children themselves. I mean, it's one of those things where how gullible and naive does the system have to be before everyone can realise it? And it's, you know, on a certain level, aside from all the other considerations here, where illegal migration is concerned, people are just taking us for mugs. They know that they can just flagrantly lie to the authorities. They know that they won't even notice. And the fact that even a judge is rubber stamping this is absolutely absurd.
Tom, couple of seconds. You've got a big film dropping online on Monday. What is it?
Yes, called Think Before You Post. It's a documentary we've made about the rise of speech policing, people being arrested, having their collars felt over social media posts. We're putting it out on Monday at 8 p.m, so people should definitely check that out if they're interested.
Think Before You Post. There you go, spiked online. My thanks to the brilliant Tom Slater. Next up, I'll be dealing with Rachel from Accounts.
Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
According to Keir Starmer, if you think young men that illegally cross the English Channel should be detained and deported, you're racist. In fact, if you even criticise any element of the immigration policies of the last 2 governments, you're racist. And yet the Home Secretary, Shubham Mahmood, tries to copy our policies.
Patriotism, a force for good, is turning into something smaller, something more like ethno-nationalism, which struggles to accept that someone who looks like me and has a faith like mine can truly be English or British.
Britain is being invaded. Thousands of fighting-age men from countries that despise Britain continue to arrive on our beaches. Our plan is the only appropriate response to a national security emergency. Immediate removal. Deportation is the ultimate deterrent.
Our flags flying proudly as we celebrate difference and oppose racism.
Labour says these policies are racist and immoral, and by implication, Reform supporters, Reform voters, Reform sympathisers are racist too. Yes, if you think we should control our borders, you are, by the definition of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, all racists.
We can all see that the country faces a choice, a defining choice. Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can choose decency, or we can choose division, renewal or decline.
To accuse countless millions of being racist is a very, very low blow. Why? Well, this language will incite and encourage the radical left. I'm thinking of Antifa and other organisations like that. It directly threatens the safety of our elected officials and our campaigners. And frankly, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder, I think this is...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning to you. It is 2 minutes past 7. Mark Dolan, temporarily looking after Morning Glory. Lovely to have your company. A very big 3 hours to come. It's the understanding of talk that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the financial wizard, known of course as Rachel from Accounts, is considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Would that be the final nail in the coffin of this Labour government? Plaid Cymru win the Caerphilly by-election in Wales. Reform UK were hoping to take the seat. What went wrong? I'll be asking their chairman, Dr. David Bull. Meanwhile, demonstrating that they couldn't organise a drinks party in a brewery, the government's failure to deliver a national inquiry into the grooming gangs is now set to be delayed into next year. What is going wrong? Will these victims ever get justice? I'll be speaking to a top former cop on that one. Plus, that's the topic of a very snappy Dolan's dispatch at 8 o'clock. I'm not pulling my punches. You won't want to miss it. Jess Phillips is the safeguarding minister. Has she got to go for this whole process to have credibility once again? Also this morning, junior doctors have announced a 5-day strike over renewed pay demands, even though they've already received an inflation-busting 5.4% in this financial year. As public sympathy for medics diminishes, particularly as they wait for treatment and give up hope of a GP appointment this side of Christmas, have the ultra-left-wing British Medical Association bitten off more than they can chew. Meanwhile, this morning, Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to smash the gangs have been smashed to pieces with abject failure of our one-in, one-out arrangement with France. And you've got the Deputy Prime Minister, mastermind himself, David Lammy, saying the whole thing's a triumph. What's he been drinking? At current rates, it's now likely 1/3 people will enter the country illegally in the course of this parliament. 300,000 people, folks. Is this now a national emergency? I'll be asking the fearless Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, who believes that he has the answer to stop the boats. The Tories have suddenly remembered conservatism, but is their shift to the right too little too late? I'll be asking their deputy chairman. And an image of a white man in a smart suit harassing a woman on a train in an article for the Mirror newspaper has gone viral. Are the public being gaslit over who exactly the perpetrators are of harassment towards women? And also, folks, the Pope goes to, the King goes to Rome to pray with the Pope. And in a Morning Glory exclusive, Dublin on fire. Are the Irish waking up to the full economic and societal cost of illegal immigration? Is Ireland now a warning to the world? I'll be speaking to a furious Irish politician who's deeply unhappy about the direction of her country. So it's a busy show. My priority is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. My number is 0344 499 1000. Tommy is on the phones today. You can book your place on the show. You can send me a text with the word talk in your message to 87222. If you're in a hurry, drop me a voice note. And you can hear us on DAB+, in-app and online, or you can watch the show by searching Talk on YouTube. This is Morning Glory. Let's get to work. Don't forget, Dolan's dispatch at 8 a.m. I'm not pulling my punches on this Labour government and the botched job of the grooming gangs inquiry. But let's get reaction to all the big stories of the day. In the company of one of the best connected journalists in the country, it is political commentator and broadcaster Benedict Spence. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Can we deal with this breaking news that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, it's reported in a couple of the papers, is considering tearing up a manifesto pledge not to raise income tax? What's your steer on this? Do you think it's possible that she'll do that in November?
I mean, when we had the Conservatives in power, we had this phenomenon of being drip-fed particularly bad policies as a suggestion that XYZ thing could happen, sort of test them with the public mood before actually then delivering the budget, which was less severe. It's possible that this is one of those attempts, but I'm not sure that it is that case. I think that what we're having at the moment is a series of policies being leaked at the moment, more actually just to prepare us for the reality of what's coming, and that is that this Labour government does plan to put up taxes. It plans to put them up quite aggressively, and that's because, unlike the Conservatives, who didn't want to put up taxes but felt that they had to, what you're going to get instead is a party in charge that actually rather likes the idea of putting up taxes, and it talks at great length about how there needs to be more done, certainly from, as they always say, isn't it, the super rich. They need to pay their fair share. Of course, you and I both know that the super rich of this country already do pay more than their fair share. But I think actually that this is one of those things that could well end up being implemented, and they will argue that it will be a fair thing because it will be shared equally amongst everything. But we already know, of course, don't we, that Keir Starmer has a very odd perception of what constitutes a working person and what doesn't. He thinks that anybody who doesn't have anything saved is basically a working person, and that everybody else who has, say, 1 month's salary saved, or anything for that matter, counts as some sort of wealthy individual. So I'm not sure that there's going to be an awful lot of sympathy for taxpayers at the moment, even though, again, everybody is crying out for a bit of tax relief because they're already being taxed to the hilt in almost every way, shape or form. Rachel Reeves, I think, will have very few qualms about putting up income tax, and it might only be a penny in the pound, but that obviously all adds up, and growth being what it is, almost, it's completely anemic in this country, it's non-existent, this will simply contribute to that. And what we have is the perpetuation of this situation that we have, which is a huge amount of money being taken out of the pockets of working people to prop up people who contribute nothing to society.
Now, Reform UK were hoping to win the Caerphilly by-election. They were not necessarily dead certs to win it, and it looks like, according to a message from Tony, who's listening to the show, it could have been tactical voting that did for Nigel Farage's party, because the Survation poll in Caerphilly had Reform UK at 42%, Plaid Cymru at 38%, Labour at 12%, the Tories at 4%. So it looks like tactical voting may have done for Reform UK, but will they be disappointed this morning?
I think that they could be disappointed. They're not going to win everything. We have to remember, as well as they're sort of doing in the polls, and sort of as inevitable and relentless as their march seems, it's not going to be possible to win everything. And they do still have one slight problem, which is that Reform are seen almost more, I think, as an English party, as a sort of an English reactionary party, rather than a UK-wide one. Now, that's something that they are going to have to overcome at some point. I don't think, therefore, that they should be too upset. We're still 4 years away from a general election where actually they will need to make this sort of support from the public count. So there's plenty of time to make this up. I think what this does show, though, the Conservatives at 4%, really. I think that's actually the sort of the big headline here, which is that as the right-wing force, certainly in Wales, I think that they are completely spent. I think we're going to see this replicated at a number of other local elections later on. So I think actually that Reform, as much as they might be a bit miffed about losing out on this one, well, the fact that Plaid have done well shows that there is no real desire for either of the mainstream parties to be backed, A, and B, the Conservatives are nowhere to be seen. Reform really can take some encouragement from that, I think, that they are the new right-wing force.
Yes, a bad day for the Uni Party. Labour and the Tories wiped out in Caerphilly in Wales. At 8 a.m, I'm going to be speaking to the chairman of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull, Benedict. What do you think his priorities are in the year ahead?
I think Reform's priorities, amongst other things, has to be recruitment. They need to be getting on board good people, not simply loud or popular people, but good people that they can wheel out in front of a camera and say, this is an expert on XYZ thing, and in however many years we plan on them being an MP because we're going to put them up as a candidate in this local seat. That's what they need to be doing. They need to be getting out there, finding the top talent, and I need to say this again, not just names, not just celebrities or influencers. They need to be getting people who have got a track record in business, in industry, in all sorts of sectors, and they need to be getting local people in the constituencies that those people plan to run familiar with them. They can't do what the Tories did at the last general election, which is leave everything when it comes to candidate selection up to the last minute and then parachute in their mates into seats that I think are very secure. They need to do that, A, and they need to be tight on messaging, B. They need to be looking out to continue setting the agenda, which they've done pretty well on things like immigration. They need to be expanding that to other areas. They need to be coming out with policies in things like education and in health that the other parties also scramble around and go, oh, well, that's popular. We should have done that as well. They need to be seen to be setting the agenda not just on things like immigration or border security. They need to be expanding that to all remits of the state.
Should they welcome all Tories with open arms? We've seen several high-profile defections. Do they have to be judicious over at Reform UK about the kind of Tory that they accept?
Yeah, they shouldn't be accepting Tories straight off the bat at all. The fact that people may or may not have been MPs in the past or MEPs once upon a time does not mean, in fact, that they should be accepting them at all. They need to be careful about this, I think. And as much as it looks good, or they think it looks good, to say, here we have another defection, this shows that we're on the rise and that the Tories are dead, whilst I do understand that, I think they can afford to be selective. And I think that they need to remember also, there is a reason that a lot of these former Tory MPs are former Tory MPs. That is to say that there was not much going on for them in the Tory party anymore. There's not much left for them, and the public have booted them out. I think Reform need to pay careful attention to that. But I'll say this again, because I do think that it's likely to happen. One of the reasons why they're interested in former Tories, former Tory MPs, is because they think it has some sort of name recognition. It has some sort of brand recognition. The majority of the members of the public do not know who their MP is. They don't know who any of these MPs are. They don't know who political journalists are. They don't know who commentators like myself are. Actually, it's only the junkies of the political world who know about people in that sort of category, in that sort of bracket. They need to be very smart about not selecting too many of those people to be the faces of the party. What the country wants is ordinary, competent people, not self-promoters.
Should Boris Johnson be banned from joining Reform UK? Because this is a guy that doesn't mind a defection or two. He upset David Cameron by backing Brexit. So the guy is ideologically and intellectually quite fluid. Should Boris Johnson be banned from joining Reform UK?
I imagine he probably already is banned from joining Reform UK. And
well, then why did they accept his best mate, Nadine Dorries?
Well, I have no idea. I'll be completely...
Make it make sense!
I have no idea why Nadine Dorries was accepted, but I think possibly I'd say that Nadine Dorries is small enough to not be a threat to Nigel Farage, whereas Boris Johnson is very clearly, in terms of personality and popularity and awareness, people's name recognition, that is one of the few people in this country that members of the public might know more about than Nigel Farage. So I suspect, even though Nadine Dorries might come along, Nigel Farage might decide to throw her a bone and go, okay, fine, you can have a lifeline. I doubt very much he'd accept Boris Johnson. I think that that's simply, the existence of Boris Johnson is simply a reminder of why people want to vote Reform rather than Conservative.
Yes, Boris Johnson embraced the worst excesses of net zero, which is socialism in a green mask. He opened the borders with the Boris wave, and he rolled out those illiberal, communist lockdowns during COVID. He's the most left-wing prime minister in 5 or 6 decades that this country's ever had. He's got to be banned from Reform UK, surely, if they're to be taken seriously. Benedict, Paul has messaged the show about Rachel from Accounts and a possibility that she's going to tear up the manifesto pledge and raise income tax. Paul says, good morning, Mark. The idea of putting income tax up is another kick in the stomach for the working people of this country. Tax thresholds have been frozen, causing people like me, who have aspired to get a promotion, to be pushed into the 40% threshold. Then Rachel Reeves is wanting to increase income tax. She needs to cut spending. There's plenty of waste she should be targeting before she has an argument or justification to raise taxes on those that are working hard and aspire to earn more than the average income. That money ends up being spent anyway, and that is what the economy needs. Paul, you're so right. Why should you work hard and get your income into that higher rate of tax threshold, given the fact that you're going to be clobbered for it? This is a voice note from Anna on Rachel Reeves. Anna, take it away.
Morning, Mark. Anna, sorry. So if Rachel Reeves is blaming Brexit for the fact that the UK's economy is tanking, who are Germany blaming for their economy? France, Italy, Spain. Are they blaming Brexit too? Is the common denominator in all this mass, unfettered, unwelcome, low-skilled immigration? Could that be part of the issue?
Well, listen, Rachel Reeves might be Britain's first woman Chancellor. I would love Anna to be Britain's second woman Chancellor, because you actually understand in that voice note, Anna, the problems facing this country. I couldn't agree more. Keep those messages coming, by the way. Book your place on the show, 03444991000. What's your reaction to the news that the Chancellor is considering raising income tax, which would, of course, tear up a manifesto pledge? Very interesting there what Anna had to say, Benedict Spence, particularly about Brexit. Who is the Chancellor kidding that our current economic turmoil is as a result of a vote made by the British people a decade ago?
I have to say, I think actually this is a failure of Brexiteers. The fact that Brexit is now being used, and you hear it quite a lot actually. It is being wielded by
They had to blow the cobwebs off it, didn't they? They went into the library of political excuses and found this old tome, which is Brexit, and blow the dust off it. This'll do.
Yeah. And it's being used, it's being wheeled out by rather a lot of people saying Brexit is the fault of all X, Y, Z, and people you hear also spinning all sorts of bogus stats about the cost of things and how it's related to Brexit. And I actually have to say I blame Brexiteers for not pushing back against this. It's almost like they've sort of sat there and accepted defeat.
I agree.
And I think that this is wrong, because I don't think that we should be foolish enough into thinking that Brexit is necessarily a settled issue. If the uber Remainers, if the sort of the hardliners work hard enough and push hard enough, they will try to force us back into the European Union by the back door. They will try to get ever closer union whatever way they can. And it's not really acceptable for Brexiteers to think, well, we won the referendum, therefore the argument is settled for, all eternity. This will, the people who were sort of wedded to the ideology of the EU, they're not going to sort of sit down and take this lightly. So to hear a Labour Chancellor and to hear other Labour MPs saying things like, oh, Brexit has been a mistake, it's been a disaster, and it's to blame for everything. That concerns me, because I think if Brexiteers don't push back against that and say, no, here in fact is the vision for the UK outside of the European Union, don't be fooled into thinking that it's not possible we'll be dragged back in. They will try to drag us back in at some point. It's a good argument, though. It's a good point what the lady said, which is, what is it that other European countries blame? Of course, they can't blame Brexit, so they have to blame their own politicians. And that's why you see increasingly also the rise of parties like the AfD in Germany. That's why the Front National, what formerly was called the Front National, are getting closer and closer to the presidency every general election, every presidential election in France. It's why George Meloni became Prime Minister of Italy. Actually, they have had they've had this moment where the dam is almost being burst by parties like Reform. And, it's funny, actually, that these parties have been around for so long. Reform have sort of come out of nowhere very quickly in a way that other parties have taken sort of 5-10 years to get there. We're simply speedrunning the same event that actually a lot of European countries have already had to go through.
Benedict, always enjoy your company. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to the brilliant political commentator and broadcaster Benedict Spence. Next up, the Prime Minister has been saying that families providing breakfast for the kids is making them out of pocket. That's right. He said that parents shouldn't be out of pocket by setting their children up for school. Well, wait a minute. Is it really the government's job to feed our kids? We'll debate that next.
If I'd been the judge, I would have sentenced this boy to at least 30 years in jail, and then, as long as he had admitted his guilt, recognised his wrongdoing, was repentant, and had behaved himself in jail, say, for example, he was then 45, 46 when he was released, I would make that subject to a new condition that I'm going to run past you. And that would be that his release would be subject only if he willingly underwent a fully irreversible vasectomy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mastermind himself, David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister for the next few minutes at least, has said that the one-in, one-out policy in order to tackle illegal immigration is working a treat. I'd like to have some of what he's had. Sharon's not happy. Good morning, Mark. I cannot get my head around Lammy. How the hell can this idiot say that this one-in, one-out deal is working? He is delusional. And Lee in Hampshire on Rachel from Accounts says, good morning, Mark. Here's an interesting fact. 100% of woman chancellors have ruined the economy from disastrous budgets. Lee, that is scientifically true. That is a provable fact. Keep those messages coming. 0344 499 1000 is my phone number. Book your call on the show. We'll take some later. Tommy is on the phones today and he's coming in hot, let me tell you. A post yesterday from number 10 Downing Street and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Let me read it out to you. The Prime Minister has said parents shouldn't be out of pocket by setting their children up for school. That's why we're rolling out free breakfast clubs. And from next September, schools will be required to limit branded items of uniform, saving families £500 and giving kids the best start in life. Well, the reason it's gone viral and caused such outrage is the idea that feeding your kids makes you out of pocket if you're a parent. Let me explain something to you. Right, putting food on the table as a parent, that's your job. As a mother and a father, it is your job to provide food for your children. You're not out of pocket, you're feeding your kids. So here's a question. Is it the job of the state to feed our children? Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the views of a highly respected former politician. He's the former Tory MP for Burnley, Anthony Higginbottom. Good morning, Anthony.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
Very well. Great to have you on Morning Glory. This is completely tin-eared on the part of the Prime Minister, isn't it?
I mean, totally. It's the Prime Minister is keen to tell us that language in politics matters, and what possessed him to use the term out of pocket when we're talking about the basic requirement of a parent bringing a child into it. I don't know if he doesn't get it or if he genuinely believes it and this is just his socialist tendencies coming out.
Most definitely, Anthony, we can all agree, and my viewers and listeners will take the view, I'm sure, as well, that the very poorest kids in our society, we don't want them to go hungry. And if there's some support at school where they can get a bite to eat before their school day, we know the educational benefits to that. But this seems to be a philosophical debate about whether it's the job now of the state to feed the nation.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There is a difference between when families and children need that extra support, maybe because, parents have fallen on hard times. We would all say at that point the state should step in and make sure that the family is supported. But what the Prime Minister is suggesting is that the state now has an ongoing responsibility to feed children. And where does that end? I look at this, Mark, and think this is something that started under COVID. It's the slow erosion of personal and family responsibility and the state taking over where it really ought not to.
Most definitely, and we had that culture during lockdown of healthy people being paid to stay at home. It's really been a big cultural shift, hasn't it?
It has, and I think one, we need to learn the lessons of it and never allow something like that to happen again. But we also have to make sure, with this government being as it is now, we've got to push back now, because the lesson from COVID is if you let this go on and on and on, it becomes an expectation and an entitlement. And you can already see that. The fact that the Prime Minister felt emboldened to use this terminology tells you where he thinks the public are. And actually, I think he's misread this. I don't think the public do see raising children as an out-of-pocket expense. And incidentally, given most businesses can use out-of-pocket expenses to deduct their tax, perhaps this is just front-loading something for Rachel Reeves at the budget.
And I'm happy to pay more taxes so that kids from broken homes who go to school on an empty stomach are supported, and I don't think most would disagree with that. But I have to agree with Stephen, who's messaging saying, it's breakfast. Is it really expensive? Go to Lidl, big box of cereal lasts for days, from 99p, some milk, job done. What kind of parents do we have now? That's Stephen in Belfast. And Angie in Gloucestershire, Anthony, says, good morning, Mark. I happened to see Two-Tier Care put up a Facebook post about breakfast clubs yesterday. The replies were both hilarious and shaming. I think, yes, parents should have to feed their own kids. Talk about a nanny state. And finally, Anthony, how about this from Jan in Newcastle, who says, good morning, Mark. Parents get child benefit to help with their children's basic needs. What are we saying in society when we're unable to give our kids a slice of toast, maybe a cup of cereal with some milk before they go to school? Also, schools use the cheapest jam. They use bread and cereal, and that's about it.
Well, I mean, everyone, exactly right. It's no surprise that Rachel Reeves is having to look at tax rises when we're essentially doubling up support. So if child benefit isn't enough to help parents who need that extra bit of support feed their children, then why are we then adding it into school? It kind of screams, about a year ago, the Labour government announced that teachers were going to be responsible for brushing children's teeth in school. And it is just this constant, we're going to make teachers and schools and society take responsibility for things that are basic parenting responsibilities. And, I would rather see taxes come down so that parents can afford to do all those things themselves. But you're right, if parents need support because they've fallen on hard times, that's what the state is there for. It's not there to support all children all time and take away the role of parents.
Well, I think it sends out the wrong message. However, Anthony, did this dependency culture happen under the Conservatives on your watch?
Yeah, undoubtedly. Some of this started under our watch. I mean, I've referenced COVID. We've got to take our share of responsibility for setting some expectations and helping to feed this culture of the state can and should do all things. The state can't and shouldn't do all those things. And, I think we as a party are trying to learn those lessons, set forward a clearer, more values-driven policy proposition, because if we don't do that, then clearly we've not learned the lessons. But also, more fundamentally, our country just ends up in a really bad way.
Most definitely. The Tories eviscerated at the Caerphilly by-election. To be fair, they were never odds-on favourites to win that seat. Where does your party go from here, Anthony?
I think we're on a long road back to people trusting us. We started the process when we elected a new leader. Anyone who thought that was going to be a quick and easy task, I certainly didn't, needs to just reflect. I think there's still a route back for us, but that will only come if, on issues like this, we can show that we are driven by values, not by cheap, flashy policy gimmicks.
Is that a dig at Nigel Farage?
It's not a dig at anyone, Mark. It's a reflection of where we are as a party. I think actually what we as a party need to do is not try and chase other parties, not try and go on the attack on them. We've got to show people that we can be trusted because of what we stand for, rather than look at us because we're not everybody else.
You are, Anthony, a robust, red-blooded Conservative. You want to lower taxes, you want to stop the boats, you want sensible levels of immigration down to the tens of thousands, and you want to scrap net zero. What is stopping you joining Reform UK? Because they're going to do all of those things and much more besides.
Do you know what, Mark? I think the public have had enough of politicians jumping on bandwagons, being quite self-serving and looking at just what's in their interests. I joined the Conservative Party back when I was 16 years old because I believed in their fundamental values of low tax, smaller state, personal responsibility, the freedom to choose where your child goes to school and how you spend your own money. And for as long as I think that the Conservative Party adheres to those values, that is my most likely political home. But, political landscapes change and we all need to be cognizant of that.
That's interesting. Can you rule out explicitly supporting reform at the next election, Anthony?
Mark, I don't rule anything out. If my 5 years in Parliament taught me anything, it's never rule anything out.
Do you miss it, by the way? Do you miss life in the House of Commons? What's it like as a civilian? Tell me.
Oh, I miss it enormously. In the House of Commons, you've got an ability to change things, to frame the debate, to push back on issues like this, and you do it in the ultimate debating arena where you can look into the eyes of Labour MPs who genuinely stand up and believe it's the state's job to take responsibility for parenting. And that's the best thing about politics and Parliament, that you get to have those robust debates. So do I miss it? Of course I do. But it's also nice being on the outside sometimes, even if it is frustrating to sit and shout at the TV like everybody else.
Most definitely. Well, listen, come and shout at us again because we enjoyed your company this morning. My thanks to former Conservative MP for Burnley, Anthony Higginbottom. I've got two chairmen to speak to today. I've got the Deputy Chairman of the Tories on where they go from here, and is their shift rightwards too little too late, and Dr. David Bull at 8 a.m. Are Reform UK disappointed they didn't take the Caerphilly by-election seat in yesterday's by-election result? Well, it went to Plaid Cymru. What does that say about the current state of British politics? Here's a question for you. Is it the job of the state to feed our kids? I'll get to your messages on that shortly. Plus, will the grooming gang victims ever get justice? We'll discuss that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Folks, lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan temporarily looking after Morning Glory. Book your place on the show, 03444991000. Is it the role of the government to feed our kids? Rain in Lincolnshire says, good morning, Mark. Children are a precious blessing. If you cannot afford to feed your kids, you should not have them. It is that simple. And Sam in Cheshire, good morning, Mark. What a joke. I'm a single mum of one 12-year-old. I'm 41. I work but do receive a top-up from Universal Credit. I would never expect anyone else to feed my children. Greg says if we can feed illegal immigrants and feed criminals in prison, then yes, we can feed our poor children. Erois says the government taking care of our children is so dystopian, pure socialism, 1984 in real time. And Jenny in Bicester says, Mark, if the state wants to feed the children, then give child's benefit in food vouchers so that it's used for food only. Now, will the victims of the grooming gangs ever get justice? Let's get the views now of a good friend of mine, former Met Police Detective Peter Blexley. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
This inquiry is a non-starter. It's now been pushed back into next year on the watch of an administration that didn't want it in the first place.
Oh, very much so. They pushed back and they pushed back and they obfuscated and they ducked the issue and they did all they possibly could to avoid setting up this large-scale inquiry, which is stumbling forwards and sometimes backwards. But with regards to your question about will these victims obtain justice, this inquiry is not something that is going to kick down front doors, slap the handcuffs on and drag people off to police stations. Now, we currently have the National Crime Agency, their Operation Stovewood, for example, which was looking into cases in Rotherham and other investigations, and they are doing some very good work in terms of arresting offenders and getting them convicted at court. This public inquiry is going to look at the systems and the failings and how this appalling situation could ever have arisen in the first place. So when we talk about justice, they're kind of different things, but we do need to be aware that there are investigations going alongside this stumbling non-starter of an inquiry, unfortunately.
Most definitely. It's a real concern. And how about this story from today's Daily Mail, Peter? A massive crime wave is heading for Britain and the public will be in danger. Britain is heading for a massive crime wave, according to the Conservatives, who have warned about the impact of Labour's soft justice master plan. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick said a major new study by the National Audit Office showed probation officers won't be able to cope with huge numbers of criminals handed community punishments instead of jail.
The public are in danger, not will be in danger. And these figures are based on recorded crime. Now, it is my firm contention that there are hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of crimes that are being committed but are not being recorded. On an almost daily basis, I come into contact with people who have been victims of crime, and when I say to them, did you report it to the police? They shrug their shoulders and say, what's the point? Because they know they are not going to get any kind of thorough investigation. So I think there are way more crimes than the statisticians tell us, and consequently we are in the grip of a huge crime wave. Britain is becoming increasingly lawless, and there is now, sadly, a responsibility upon ourselves to keep ourselves and each other safe, because the police are not patrolling the streets and they're not preventing very much crime at all.
And what's your picture of how the country will look by the time of the next election in terms of crime? How unsafe will my viewers and listeners be, do you think, Peter?
Well, that will depend on whether the College of Policing, the National Police Chiefs Council and those highly educated senior police chiefs, the length and breadth of the country, get a grip. And by that I mean, are they going to deliver the policing that the public wants? Are they going to patrol the streets, thereby preventing crime, increasing public confidence and becoming known within neighbourhoods? Are they going to lock up bad people, get them off the streets, which is what the public wants. They're doing plenty of that at the moment, but they need to do more. Get on the streets, be visible, be contactable, and serve as a deterrent.
Well, that's obviously absolutely critical, isn't it? There's one issue, isn't there? The economy. Without the financial firepower, we can't have more prisons and prison places, more prison officers and more cops, more bobbies on the beat.
Priorities. What are this government's priorities? How many billions are we wasting on illegal immigrants coming into the UK on dinghies week after week after week? There could be huge savings if that problem was stopped. That money could be, most importantly, ploughed into law enforcement and the crumbling criminal justice system, which isn't working from the front end to policing, to the courts and the CPS, both underperforming, crumbling buildings, rubbish IT, to the prisons, some of which are Victorian, unfit for human habitation, and worse, through to probation, a probation service whose performance has tumbled by a half in recent years, and they now only properly monitor a quarter of their workload.
A chilling message, Peter. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to former Met Police Detective Peter Blexley. Is it the job of governments to provide breakfast for all of Britain's kids? This from Sean in West Yorkshire. Good morning, Sean. Sean says, no, Mark, the government should not be there to provide breakfast for our children. It's your parental responsibility. However, you do have to remember there are plenty of people who deliberately have children in order to continue benefit payments. That's Sean in West Yorkshire. And Amanda says, no, schools should not have to feed kids breakfast, but all parents who don't feed their children before school should have to go on a course. Choose from cheap healthy eating or better household budgeting. Same for everyone using food banks. Don't go on about broken homes either. I was brought up on a council estate from a broken home, and I always went to school with food in my tummy. That's Amanda. Well, Amanda, your family did a great job to raise you as a fine woman. Listen, thank you for that. Keep those messages coming. I'll take your calls next. Rachel Reeves, it is our understanding, is now considering tearing up her manifesto promise not to raise income tax. Is this the beginning of the end for this Labour administration? Plus, the doctors are on strike. Have you run out of sympathy? We'll discuss that next.
office. This is foreign aid. We're paying for this. A 111 million programme in Pakistan. I'm sure we're all worried about this, by the way. Accelerating family planning in Pakistan. Basically, we're going to give Pakistan £111 million worth of condoms. I mean... You couldn't make this stuff up, could you?
I don't even know where this is coming from. I mean, there was
a position of insanity, I would suggest.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is it the job of the government to feed Britain's kids? Anne is in Gwinnett. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning.
Listen, what do you think about
your show this morning?
Oh, well, that's so nice to have your company. Thank you, Anne. I wasn't planning to be here, and I'm normally doing the weekends, but look, it's great to have this conversation. I'm going to get to your comments about Rachel Reeves and the budget in just a moment. But do you think it's
How
the
long
job?
have you got?
I know. Do you think it's the job of the government, Anne, to feed Britain's kids?
No. I think it's sad that domestic science that was taught years ago has been stopped. But on holiday once, I was talking to a lady who was social services, and she said the family next door to where she lived were drug addicts and they didn't know how to feed the children. Well, what can you do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a basic requirement of a parent.
Well, Anne, the Prime Minister yesterday said that parents shouldn't be out of pocket by feeding their kids. You're not out of pocket for feeding your kids, are you? That's your job.
What is the family allowance now? I've no idea. My children are grown up.
At least 50 quid a week, I think.
50? I mean, if you can't feed somebody on £50 a week, there's something wrong.
There's something deeply wrong.
Supermarkets are quite inexpensive. Yes, I know we've got expensive supermarkets, but the basic supermarkets, you can get good food, but can they cook?
And can I ask you, have you got kids, Anne?
Yes.
And are they grown-up kids?
They're grown up, but I've also got grandchildren who are fed exceedingly well.
And if you were on a budget, which many of my viewers and listeners are, and are struggling financially...
I'm a pensioner, I'm on a budget, but right. I can still feed my family when they come for a meal.
And how would you... Let's imagine you were a struggling mum of one. How would you feed your kids in the morning? What would your solution be if money was too tight to mention?
I would give them a glass of milk, and I would give them a boiled egg and a slice of toast.
My goodness, that would definitely set them up. And a big part of this is the economy, of course. That's why families are struggling. Rachel Reeves blames Brexit. It's possible that she may tear up a manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. What's your reaction?
Well, one thing, seriously, I think the manifesto should be a legal binding document, so they can't change their mind. And I cannot, as a parent, a family person, and I'm on a pension now, I cannot understand how anyone on this earth can borrow money to give it away. I don't know whether they've been cloned as incompetent, but we just can't keep giving money away and taking it off people who are working. I've got family, I've got relatives who've got businesses, and they work damned hard.
Yeah. And what do you think? What do you think Rachel Reeves and this government think of the people that you know who work hard and run their own businesses? What's Labour's attitude to them?
I honestly don't think that they understand, because they live in their own little world. Yeah. None of them have run a business. None of them. A housewife, a mother. Well, we'll say both, because my daughter's husbands are fantastic. But you have your housekeeping and you budget. It's that simple. And you go without if you can't afford it. or you save up for something. But the basic requirement is food and warmth and love.
Anne, sending you lots of warmth and love. What a brilliant call, very powerfully made. Anne in Gwynedd in Wales there, saying that it's not the job of the government to feed our kids. And she's very concerned about the looming tax rises coming in this November budget. If they do actually tear up that manifesto promise and raise income tax, is that it for Labour? Is that the final nail in the coffin? Let me know your thoughts, 03444 499 1000. Dan in Hartlepool. Mark, growing up on a council estate, I was always fed. Some days that meant my mum counting out the penny jar. So no, schools shouldn't have to feed kids. But in a cost of living crisis and when a government spends millions on migrants, and a bit of toast is not the end of the world when you look at it in that way. Our kids should be put before illegal migrants on every front. Dan, all British citizens should be put ahead of migrants. The end. Am I going to get cancelled for that? Producer Christian? Maybe I will. Good. Cancel away. I'm delighted to say now that we're joined by Dr. Lawrence Buckman, general practitioner, former chair of the BMA's GPs committee, to react to the news that junior doctors are to walk out for 5 days of strikes in action over pay rises as patients face chaos. Dr. Buckman, welcome to Morning Glory.
Morning.
Is this strike justified?
No. I think the idea that doctors strike against patients should be the absolute last resort, and we should be nowhere near that position now.
Now, they say that they've been historically underpaid and that all they're asking for is a catch-up.
Yes, that's true, but you don't go about it by going on strike. You need to talk. They will be talking shortly. They might as well talk now. This is a much more complex thing than just handing out money. And I don't think you can resolve this by striking against patients and then expecting that your demands will be met because you went on strike. They have a legitimate case, but not the way they're putting it. And this is a really complex pay structure that needs to be sorted out. There are anomalies in it, but I'm afraid I don't think this is the way to do it.
What kind of money are the junior doctors on at the moment, Dr. Buckman?
Junior doctors, we now call them resident doctors, they vary in pay between about 38,000 and up to, but remember these junior doctors are people who are about to become consultants. With overtime, they can get about £90,000. So it's a huge spread between those who are beginning and those who are just about to be consultants. This doesn't apply to GPs, it's a completely different pay structure for them. But the idea that you deserve pay at a time when what we're trying to do is get more doctor jobs because we have the anomaly of doctors not being able to get work. The idea that you strike in order to encourage the employer to give you more money yourself rather than get more doctors into employment, I think is a peculiar one.
Most definitely. Inflation is clearly a factor as well. And in fact, the resident doctors have had over 5% this year.
Yes, that's true. They have. What they want is to get their pay structure sorted, and I support that. But I think they have to get round a table and talk. They haven't been talking very long to the Secretary of State, and already they're on strike. And I just think this needs calm, cool consideration, not if you don't give us the money now, we're off. Well, that's not the way you trade if you're trying to get an agreement. And this agreement needs to stand so we don't get this position again where junior doctors, resident doctors are so far behind. You can't catch up everybody's pay in Britain to make it so that everybody is getting what they were getting 20 years ago uprated. That's a very strange economic base.
Some of the viewers and listeners to Morning Glory have suggested to me that it should be illegal for doctors and nurses to go on strike in the same way that it's illegal for the military and for the police to down tools. What do you think about that?
I would prefer that it wasn't that way, but I can understand the logic that says people in certain professions should not be able to strike. As a consequence, of course, you'd expect them to be listened to more carefully when it comes to reforming their pay structure, reforming their pay, you'd have to give that due consideration. So I think there are swings and roundabouts here, but the idea of making it illegal, which I would regret, is something that clearly every government must consider, whether certain classes of people who work for the state should not be able to strike.
I've heard grumbles from medics, doctors and nurses about the political direction of the British Medical Association. Many people think that it's just a body that, you know, supports healthcare and the health of the nation, but it is a politicised trade union. What do you think about the ideology within the BMA at the moment and its political tactics?
Well, I'm not a member of the BMA anymore because of what's gone on within the BMA. And I can't speak for them now. Politicisation has always been an issue. The BMA is a very broad church, and there are people within it who could reasonably be characterised as well to the left and well to the right. And most of us, of course, were in between. When some faction gets in control, which has happened in my time many times, actually, I think that's unfortunate, because you end up with the British Medical Association, which isn't just dealing with Britain and isn't just medical.
There you go. Well put. Next up, Dolan's Dispatch and Dr. David.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People smuggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would the people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... Those, the smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Yeah. Well, sure, the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer is on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You
It's
just can't
crap.
say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels, and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, top of the morning to you. I am Mark Dolan. This is Morning Glory. The time is 2 minutes past 8. A big 2 hours coming up. Now, it's the understanding of Morning Glory that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the financial wizard known as Rachel from Accounts, is considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Would that be the final nail in the coffin of this Labour government? Plaid Cymru win the Caerphilly by-election in Wales. Reform UK were hoping to take that seat. I'll get reaction from their chairman, Dr. David Bull, in just a moment. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to smash the gangs have been smashed to pieces with the abject failure of the one-in, one-out arrangement. Now, at current rates, according to our calculations, it's now likely that 1/3 people, 300,000 people, will enter the country illegally in the course of this Parliament. Is this now a national emergency? I'll be asking the fearless Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, who believes that he's got the answers as to how to stop the boats. Finally, the Tories have become conservative again. They want to lower taxes, scrap net zero and close the borders. Is it too little too late? I'll be asking their deputy chairman. And this is a big one, folks, in a breakfast show exclusive, that's right, a Morning Glory exclusive, we'll be looking at Dublin on fire. Are the Irish waking up to the full economic and societal cost of illegal immigration? Is Ireland now a warning to the world? I'll be speaking to an Irish politician who's deeply unhappy about the direction of her country. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So a very busy 2 hours to come. My priority is to get your opinions on the national radio and television airwaves. My number is 0344 499 1000. You can book your place on the show. Tommy is on the phones this morning. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can send me a voice note, and indeed, we are everywhere. You can hear us on DAB+, you're in-app, online. You can watch the show by searching Talk on YouTube. This is Morning Glory. Let's get to work. And we'll start with something that we normally do on Weekend Breakfast, which is a Dolan dispatch. How hard can it be? Tens of thousands of women were abused on an industrial scale. All they want is answers. All they want is accountability. All they want is proof that this will never happen again. All they want is justice. Whilst these horrors have occurred for decades on the watch of multiple administrations, including the Conservatives, it is this egregious Labour government, this crazily woke Labour government, who are so reluctant to have a national inquiry, who now continue to gaslight and let down the victims of these most evil crimes. It was political correctness and a fear of upsetting community relations and being called racist that allowed these monsters, many of whom I'm afraid to say we have imported into the country, they were enabled to continue their crimes in relation to vulnerable girls in our society with impunity because of political correctness. And we now have a current administration who are perpetuating that madness. Labour didn't want a national inquiry, and they represent constituencies and local authorities where these crimes were most often perpetrated. Labour are running scared, and they're about to elect a Deputy Prime Minister in Lucy Powell, who dismissed people voicing concerns about the grooming gangs as indulging in dog whistle politics. And we have a safeguarding minister in Jess Phillips, who seems focused only on the safeguarding of her own ego and of her own career. This is a safeguarding minister who stands accused of calling one of the victims a liar in the House of Commons. 5 of the victims have now completely walked away from Labour's inquiry, and the hotly tipped chairman has withdrawn his candidacy as well. It is a complete mess. And given the protracted nature of the process, it's unlikely that these women will ever get justice on the watch of Sir Keir Starmer, partly because ongoing political correctness means that the ethnicity of these gangs still remains a taboo subject for this government. But I'm so sorry, you can cancel me for saying this, but the demographics speak for themselves. And a top lawyer who represents the victims told me in an interview earlier this year that upwards of 250,000 young women may have been attacked over the last few decades. 250,000 women. And he told me that these crimes aren't just ongoing, right? They're not just ongoing. They are worse than ever. It's happening now. And now, at the hands of this egregious administration, these women are victims all over again. They want justice. How hard can it be? Your reaction, 03444991000. Will the victims of grooming gangs ever get justice? And what about that statistic? 250,000 women impacted with this crime, not just ongoing, but worse than ever. I'll get to your views very shortly. But we've got some political news now because the Plaid Cymru Party in Wales have won the by-election of Caerphilly. Reform were hoping to snatch victory. They were unsuccessful. Let's find out why from the chairman of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull. Good morning, David.
Good morning to you. So good to be back on the home of common sense. Good morning, Mark.
Definitely. Well, listen, I enjoyed your weekend breakfast show here on the channel, but now you're busy preparing Reform UK for government, no doubt. Were you disappointed by yesterday's result?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, yes, of course, slightly disappointed. But I also think we have to put this into context. We have done remarkably well. Look, 4 years ago, we were polling at 1.7%. And last night, or this morning, we got 36%. That is a meteoric rise by any kind of metric. Actually, I think that's pretty unparalleled in modern British political history. So we did extremely well. Of course, we are disappointed not to do that. But what it does show, when you look at those figures, Labour absolutely decimated, going down to 11%, and the Tories wiped off the board. Quite frankly, they might as well pack up and go home at 2%. But what we are seeing in Wales, and I can see this replicated around the United Kingdom. I'm going on my chairman's tour. I've seen 5,000 people in the last 4 months. Now, 2 days ago, I was in Liverpool, again, a traditionally Labour stronghold. Now, the Labour vote there has collapsed from 83% down to 42%. So it's halved. Since Keir Starmer came in, they've lost 20% of their vote. And that is what we are seeing across the board. In Wales, generally, we're polling at 28%. In Scotland at 22%, and in the rest of the United Kingdom, when you take it as an aggregate, at 36%. If there was a general election tomorrow, that means that Reform UK becomes the party of government. We would have an astonishing 445 members of parliament, a whopping majority. And I think what that says, and I know this from the talkTV viewers as well, is that actually, and I said this last night, this is a last chance saloon to save this once great country. And that is why people are saying, I am sick and tired of the two-party politics and we need something different. And that's what we saw in Wales. This was a two-horse race between Plaid and us. Yes, we didn't win, but next time we will.
Did tactical voting hurt you yesterday, and could it hurt you at the next election?
Yeah, it's a brilliant point, actually. Yes, it did, and yes, it could. So my real concern was there was a massive poll out the other day. It's called an MRP poll. You'll know what that is, but it's a very big poll. It showed that we were well in the lead at 42% and Plaid at 38%. And I think what that did, and when I saw it, I thought, crikey, that's not what we need right now, because I think it changed the way that some people voted. I was speaking to some Liberal Democrats. They lent their vote to Plaid, and of course it got them over the line. Now, I think there's one other thing that we need to look at here, which is actually in by-elections, people vote very differently to a general election. And so people felt that Plaid were the right people, and look, you know, this is a democracy, and I have to respect that decision. But actually, when it comes to a general election, I don't think people are going to vote in the same way. I'm really bullish about this, really upbeat about this, because we are growing so quickly. I've been, obviously, you know, I've been there right since the very beginning. And if I look back to sort of 2020, we were polling at 2-3% across the country. So to go from 2-3% when I was deputy leader to actually where we are today at 36%, that is absolutely extraordinary. And those polls are going up. 2 weeks ago, we were at 33%, now 36%. What are we going to be on next week?
Most definitely. Is there a concern that the perception of the party is that it's the party of England?
No, I don't think so at all. And that's reflected by how well we're doing in Wales and Scotland as well. These are very difficult areas for us, tribally and traditionally, but actually across the country, people are saying they're sick and tired. The number one issue across the country, across the United Kingdom, is immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. People are sick and tired of what is going on. If you look at illegal immigration, Keir Starmer said, I'm going to smash the gangs. Well, he hasn't, has he? And we now know that more people have come here illegally this year than in the entirety of last year. Then we come to legal immigration. 3.8 million people came here in the Boris wave. Half of those people have not worked and will never work. And that is unacceptable as well. Many of them low skilled, many of them not speaking English. And people say, right, enough is enough. We want change. We want to vote for something different.
Of course, that's certainly the prevailing view. Very, very strong on legal and illegal immigration, with a coherent plan to tackle both of those issues. But the weak spot of Reform UK seems to be the economy. Many people think that the Reform Party are basically quasi-socialists.
I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, certainly in terms of the economy.
Big states, scrapping the two-child benefit cap, nationalising industries.
So that's quite interesting, actually. Just in terms of the economy, obviously, Doge, we are trying to find savings at council level. Richard Tice is doing an excellent job. He's taken over that role as well. We actually have very pragmatic policies. What we have to do is actually to grow the economy. And by doing that, we want to take the lowest paid out of tax completely. So actually, we will change that. So if you earn under £20,000, you will pay no tax at all. The two-child benefit cap also is about encouraging people to have children. We have an ageing population. If you look at the metrics of that, we actually have to find a way to afford to have great social care. And as you know, as a medic, as a former medic, I believe the way we treat elderly people in this country is disgraceful. So I want great social care. You can only do that when your tax revenues go up. And that is why we actually have to invest in young people. But my whole overriding mantra of this is putting Britain and British industry first. And that is a matter of national security.
And I think you're right, of course. You look at the inability of the country to produce steel, all the rest of it. But you mentioned the very attractive policy of having a threshold of £20,000, the point at which people pay tax. I can support that, but I don't know how it's paid for. You're looking at a cost of potentially £50 billion a year.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly one of the things that I'm doing, and I've been chairman for 4 months, one of the things I'm doing is I've got...
You bought a calculator?
I bought a calculator, very good, and an abacus. So what I'm doing is putting policy working groups together. So we're bringing great economists together on the economy. They're working to Richard. They will come up with a full economic plan. But there's no point us unveiling that until we actually have all the nuts and bolts lined up, where we know we can actually go through line item by line item. And that is what we are going to do. On the health service, I'm in charge of that. So I'm bringing in people who actually know something about the NHS. These are professors of medicine, nurses, physios, people who work in procurement. So actually, what we are trying to do is to change the way this country is run. It is not an easy task by any means. And actually, I'm really confident that we will come to the next election with a full set of policies which are costed, pragmatic, that put British people first.
What's your reaction as a former medic to the news that the junior doctors, the resident doctors, are to go on strike for 5 days?
I'm just so disappointed, actually. Resident doctors, as they're now called, got a 22% pay rise. On top of that, they got another 5%. They're now holding out for another 28%. That's 55% pay uplift. Now, you talk to anyone who runs a small business, people who are struggling with the cost of living, the energy bills, we have the highest energy prices in the developed world. All of this is totally unacceptable. I'm ashamed, actually, of the resident doctors. Many of my friends are consultants. They're very senior doctors in the NHS. They are absolutely flabbergasted by what is going on. We saw the decimation in COVID. And actually, this fallacy, the NHS is the best health service in the world, is just completely false. Our cancer survival rates are 15 years behind the rest of Europe. I say to the junior doctors, and remember, this is not the majority of doctors, actually. I think what we should do, and certainly if I was in charge of the health service, we need to look after pastoral care of doctors much more, because they have huge amounts of debt when they qualify. I don't believe we're attracting necessarily the right people into medicine. I personally, as Reform UK policy, would underwrite the entirety of the tuition fees for doctors. So if you serve 10 years in the NHS as a result of training, we will write off the entirety of your student debt. And I think that's a really pragmatic diplomatic way to say, look, we are going to look after you. We are going to give you hot food. I know from my time as a junior doctor, there was never any hot food. There was no water. You couldn't actually sleep anywhere. The accommodation was terrible. If we get that stuff right, actually, and if we pay off their debt, then I think a lot of this can be resolved.
Are you concerned, though, that a lot of the messaging from Reform UK is about splashing the cash, and it is about scrapping the two-child benefit cap, raising the income tax threshold? There you've mentioned cancelling the student debts of medics. It's all spend, 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 isn't it?
No, it isn't actually. When you look, obviously there's the Laffer curve. The more you tax people, actually, your tax revenues go down. This is what Laffer proves so brilliantly. We already are seeing with this high tax economy, I mean, Rachel Reeves has no idea what she's doing, or as Lee Anderson calls her, Rachel from accounts. I mean, she had a £30 billion hole, didn't she? And then now she's got a £50 billion hole. She's going after people. I talk to people who run small businesses the whole time, and they are shutting up shop. When you've got employers' national insurance going from 13.8% to 15%, people stop employing people. This is a disaster. A pub a day is closing under a Labour government. I live in a village. The pub is the lifeblood of that village. It's where elderly people come out and talk to people in the village. If we lose those pubs, if we lose local businesses because of these insane economic policies from Labour, then we are destroying this country. So 11,000 non-doms have left the country already. They've said, right, I'm going to live somewhere else. We're not going to employ anyone. This is a disaster. If you have a lower tax burden, your tax revenues go up and people stay in this country. And that is a pragmatic way to actually move this economy and to grow the economy. That I fought for Brexit. What was the point of Brexit if we don't actually make this a low tax, really competitive economy?
Benson says, Ben in Stockweller's message, reform will never win the majority. The UK is not ready to vote for chaos. Harsh words there from Ben. It is critically important, isn't it, that as the chairman of the party, that you prepare Reform UK for government. You've perhaps got 3.5 years to get ready for power. You need a plan, and it's critical that Reform UK doesn't overpromise and underdeliver. Otherwise, it's game over for the country, isn't it?
I mean, look, it's a really good point, actually, and we've got some great people. One of the accusations levelled at us, and I think it is a fair accusation, is that whilst we've got people, great people, people with experience, we don't have experience of running government. And that's why the defection of people like Danny Kruger is really important. Of course, he was David Cameron's speechwriter. He is now head of our department for preparing for government. We also have other people who want to come across. Now, one of the things that I talk to Nigel about a lot is that we cannot afford to be the Tory party 2.0. We want to take the best and the brightest, but actually, as I said, I'm building this party from the ground up. We want people with experience. If you're a plumber, a bricklayer, an electrician, someone who's run a business, those are the people who actually know how to grow this country. Let's stop taking people from Oxford and Cambridge with PPE degrees who've never done anything. That is not how you build a coalition of brilliant people who have vision, determination and drive to actually move the country forward.
David, fantastic to see you. My thanks to the chairman of Reform UK, David Bull. Are you buying it? Are Reform UK serious about power? Do their sums add up? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. The by-election in Caerphilly was a victory for Plaid Cymru. We've got reaction from Steve with a voice note. Take it away, Steve.
Morning, gents. This is Stephen Hartz. With reference to the Caerphilly by-election, I think 35% is an incredible performance for Reform from nothing. Labour, on the other hand, 11%. It just shows how incredibly unpopular they now are. In a Labour stronghold to get 11%.
A brilliant voice note. Do keep them coming. Next up, Dublin on fire. Is anger around illegal immigration in Ireland reaching a tipping point? And is Ireland a warning to the world? We'll discuss that next.
resign?
Absolutely. I think the way that she conducted herself yesterday in the House of Commons was disgusting. I think you really need to look at her now and think, how are you one that liaises with survivors and victims when you can't even contain yourself, when you're going public? She was embarrassing and she was angry. But the question is now, why were you angry? Is it because it didn't go how you wanted it to go?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside the City West Hotel in Saggart on Dublin's outskirts after a 10-year-old girl was allegedly sexually assaulted near the facility by an asylum seeker. So what began as a peaceful protest escalated over consecutive nights as crowds threw bricks, glass bottles and fireworks at members of the police force. So what's going on in Ireland? Is it a red flag? Is it a demonstration of the true impact of illegal immigration? I'm going to get to your thoughts on that. We're going to talk, by the way, about our own boats crisis in just a moment. We've calculated here on Morning Glory that upwards of 300,000 people will enter the country illegally in the course of this parliament. 1/3 And the left tell us that the numbers are trivial and that it's a drop in the ocean compared to legal net migration. Well, I beg to differ, and I'll get reaction from Tony Smith, who of course is the former head of our borders operation, who believes that he's got the answer. And I'll be honest with you, it's very, very closely aligned with Reform UK's suggested policy. But it's interesting, Ireland, I do think, is a metaphor for Western malaise over porous borders, because what you've got is a small indigenous country which has been completely turned upside down by vast numbers of people entering the country. There's one particular town in Clare with a population of about 1,000 people, and the population doubled overnight when asylum seekers were bussed in. Surely that's going to be a disaster for the economy and for social cohesion. I'm delighted to say we're going to get reaction from top politician in Ireland, Niamh Ebree, who joins us on the phone. Niamh, thank you so much for your time. We've had a bit of trouble getting hold of Niamh at the moment. Ireland's not very far away, but it seems the technology has let us down. Niamh, can you hear me?
Hello.
Oh, Niamh, thank you so much. Welcome to Morning Glory on Talk. Tell me about the levels of anger in Ireland at the moment about illegal immigration.
So I think that there's probably a very familiar pattern happening here, especially in regard to what you're seeing over there in Britain. And what Ireland is a much smaller country, of course, with a much smaller population, and the changes here are absolutely unprecedented. So you have enormous demographic changes, not only occurring in relation to illegal immigration, but also in relation to legal immigration. And it's estimated now that almost a quarter of people living in Ireland weren't born here. So this is, unprecedented kind of sea change. And a lot of people in Ireland, a lot of ordinary people feel that these changes have happened very quickly and without any kind of consultation. And then when it comes to illegal immigration, which is mostly people coming here, as you're seeing in your own country, claiming asylum, there's an awful lot of other issues that are arising as well. And what we saw in City West this week, and what we saw in Dublin previously with the Dublin riots, was, I think, flashpoints that sometimes miss the bigger picture, if you like, because people in City West aren't protesting because they're opposed to migrants or they hate people who are different to them. They're protesting because the very things that they said would happen are now happening. and they're really, really, really angry with the government.
That's right, and we've got this terrible case of a 10-year-old girl who was allegedly sexually assaulted near a facility housing asylum seekers, and it seems that there's been deafening silence from most of the media in Ireland and the political establishment.
Yeah, so it's actually really extraordinary. So, like, what you have to understand is, what do we know about the case? What we know about the case is that it involves a 10-year-old girl. And I think most of your listeners will understand that there's almost an immediate visceral reaction to news like that.
Yeah.
You know, like many of us have had daughters of that age. We know people of that age. They're children. Like a 10-year-old, you're a small child, and I think the thought of somebody being like, of someone that age being sexually assaulted is just horrific. Like your instinct is kind of, it's a very visceral instinct. And then we know that the person who is accused of assaulting her, of allegedly assaulting her, is an asylum seeker from Africa. And we know that there was a deportation order issued against that person in March of this year, and that deportation order clearly didn't take effect, whether it was because it's being appealed, and of course these appeals all take place funded by the taxpayer, or whether it was because it was simply ignored, as so often has been the case in this country. But this case isn't happening in isolation. Like, several days before that, we had this absolutely horrific case where a young Ukrainian who came here, and, you know, some of the correspondents writing about this are speculating whether he came here to avoid being drafted, to avoid conscription into the war with Russia, you know, to avoid being sent to the front, in other words, and being killed. And he was here just a matter of days, 3 or 4 days. He was staying in accommodation which is run by TUSLA, which is our child and family agency. And he was attacked by another person who was staying in the same apartment.
So a Ukrainian goes to Ireland to be safe and is attacked by a migrant.
He was attacked by another unaccompanied minor, in other words, someone who was under 18, who was a migrant, who was staying in the apartment run by TUSLA. And it was a particularly, and I'm not trying to be gratuitous here, it was a particularly horrific attack. He was stabbed more than 100 times. You know, the post-mortem took longer because the attack was so violent and so vicious. And a young Somalian is being questioned about that murder. And that happened just days before this young girl was allegedly seriously sexually assaulted in City West. Now, the people who live around City West is an enormous asylum complex. It's not a house or a small centre. You know, up to 1,000 people can
and of course, it's a former popular hotel.
It's a former popular hotel, and the people who live in City West have long been, and they're like the other communities you mentioned there. There are people, there's been no consultation. Like, basically what people were told for the last 4 or 5 years, when these numbers started to rocket completely out of control, we went from bringing in 2,000 asylum seekers, 2,000, 3,000 asylum seekers a year, to climbing up to 13,000 and almost up to 20,000 in a year. And it happened so fast, and basically Irish people were told, no veto, and you have no consultation. You have to just put up and shut up. And the people in City West have been campaigning for years now, and they've been completely ignored by the political establishment, completely ignored. They've done everything right. They've held public meetings, they've organised petitions. Like
peaceful protests as well.
Peaceful protests as well. They did everything they could the right way, and they were ignored. And they warned that this would happen, because in one of the meetings that they held, GRIP, who I work for, went down to report on that meeting. And normally these local meetings, which are always packed, which always represent the entire village or town or suburb where this is happening almost, or at least a very large percentage of them, they're normally ignored by the rest of the media. And at that particular meeting, women in particular stood up and said, we don't feel safe anymore. We're being followed. Photographs have been taken of us. You know, remarks have been made to us. One woman said, I now run to get my train every morning. I don't feel safe.
This is Ireland, for goodness sake. This is the Republic of Ireland, which I mean, my family are Irish, Neem, and you know, childhood holidays to Ireland. What have you got? You've got a beautiful country with amazing people, a small, homogenous, white Roman Catholic population, no great allergy to immigration, but clearly at this scale, it's deeply destructive. I mean, I've heard about small towns in Ireland where they've had their population double overnight because of busloads of asylum seekers done at night so as to avoid public anger. With the clock against us, Niamh, how do you see this playing out in Ireland?
Well, I think it's interesting because just as you said earlier, largely the media want to move the sexual assault of this girl just as they moved the stabbing, something that had never happened before in this country. You know, small children were stabbed outside their school.
These are not Irish crimes.
And that led to the Dublin riots. They want to move the horror of what's happening to small children, to Ukrainian teenagers, and then to young girls. Want to move that off the front pages and the entire focus to be on people who get very upset and then get out of control. Like most of the people in City West are not throwing rocks or engaging in violent protests. Most of the people there, just as in everywhere else throughout the country, just want the government to listen. They don't want enormous asylum centres in their area. So the government needs to get real here. They need to pause any more asylum seekers coming into the country, and then they need to listen to what people are saying. I would just say this finally to you, that it's estimated that 22,000 asylum seekers are in Ireland and came here without any passport or identification. We don't know who these people are, and yet they are being put into communities and people feel unsafe, and people must be listened to.
What has happened to one of the safest, most beautiful countries in the world is a true crime on the part of many administrations, and Ireland exists as a warning to the world. Niamh, I hope you'll join us again in the near future, because it's been very compelling to hear your overview of this. An Irish politician based in Dublin, Niamh E. Breen, thank you for your time. So that's Ireland. What about Britain? Talk Breakfast, OK, Morning Glory has calculated that upwards of 300,000 people will enter Britain illegally in the course of this parliament, right? Over a third of a million. Is this now a national emergency? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots to get through. The King is in Rome and he's praying with the Pope. Is he praying that Prince Andrew will leave the Royal Lodge? I'll be asking a man that knows the King intimately well. His former butler, Grant Harold, joins us later in the show. Plus your calls, book your place on the show, 0344 499 1000. Is it the job of the government to feed our kids? Here's a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mark. Sean from Grimsby here. It's not the job of the government to feed our kids. It's our job to feed our kids. Me and my missus have always done it. And this is the problem with the country we have now. It's just a big poncing country where there's millions of people just poncing loads of free stuff. I don't want to pay for anybody else's kids either, right? You know, if you can't afford to feed your kids, then get a job. You shouldn't have to pay for it as dossers because you can't be bothered to get out and work. Great show, mate.
Thank you, Sean. Not pulling your punches, and may God bless you for that. Keep those opinions coming. Now, it's the understanding of Morning Glory that at the current rate, illegal immigration in the course of this Parliament will reach 300,000 people. That's 1/3 people likely to enter Britain illegally over the course of this Parliament. Is this now a national emergency? Let's get the views of Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force. Tony, is that the right language? An emergency situation now?
Well, Mark, if you remember when the boats first started coming under the previous government, then I think the Home Secretary of the day, Sajid Javid, declared it to be a critical incident. What was that, 6 years ago? I don't know whether it is still a critical incident, but it's certainly top priority for the government. It's a very big problem for them. And it's pretty clear that not only are we seeing more and more unrest across the country about asylum seekers, undocumented migrants being placed in communities without thorough, proper checks, but also, this yesterday or day before that, a record number, a number exceeding the whole of last year has already come through. So it's pretty clear to me that more and more people are getting concerned about this. The government initiatives so far haven't really worked in stemming the numbers, and as your projections suggest, that unless something radical changes, then we're going to see a lot more of this for a very long time, I'm afraid.
And we've had figures, on both sides of the debate who have suggested that illegal immigration is pretty small scale. It's a drop in the ocean compared to legal net migration. Well, a figure like 300,000 is not a small figure, and every individual that enters the country illegally is a huge burden on the taxpayer and a national security risk.
Yeah, and it's not just boat arrivals, actually. They're the ones that get all the publicity, Mark, but there are also a significant number of asylum seekers who come by other routes. Some, you had a report from Ireland, some come through Ireland. There are others that come on visas and claim asylum when they get here. And the figures we saw for asylum intake was 110,000 a year, potentially all of those illegal entrants. So your figures may be on the low side, really, if you're talking about asylum intake. And so we do need, it's asylum intake that we should be looking at, and I was involved in trying to reduce asylum intake in my time in the UK Border Agency. That should be a top priority for the UK Border Agency and the Home Office to reduce asylum intake, but so far they've not done very well at that, and I think that we need to look much more radical measures to do something about this, because, as I say, pretty clear that all the initiatives we've seen so far from this administration haven't really worked, have they?
No, and it's quite clear that for his sins, Sir Keir Starmer is a very ambitious man. He did win the last election. He wants to be Prime Minister and remain so. That's far more likely to happen if he stops the boats. Why won't he pull those levers, which we know are at his disposal, to tackle the issue, given that it's in his political interest to do so?
Well, I think we need to look at the history of this, and, the Prime Minister is a human rights lawyer. He comes from a background of the criminal justice system. He was elected in terms of this particular topic on a basis that he was going to abolish the Rwanda plan, and he was going to extend criminal prosecution measures against the gangs and smash the gangs. I worked in the immigration department for a very long time in the Border Force, and actually the criminal justice system, Mark, doesn't really work for them. They're not frightened of being arrested and taken to court. We can try and disrupt them upstream. We need to get after their money. But a lot of those measures that have been introduced, even with additional resources to the Border Security Command, are not going to stop the pull factor of migrants wanting to come here. What you need to do is to reduce that pull factor so they don't get all of the benefits that we give them under the asylum support system when they arrive, and preferably that they are detained. The detention estate has been decimated since I left the department. The only people being detained when they come off the boats now from France are those that might be earmarked for the one-to-one process, which we know are very, very small numbers. The rest are simply getting temporary admission. They're going into the asylum support system. And so, we're seeing more and more turning up in the communities. So we do need a radical investment in detention accommodation. We need a complete overhaul of our framework, our legislative framework, to enable us to remove people from this country, either to their source countries, or if not that, to a third country, such as the Rwanda plan. But none of that is really happening. I mean, we are sort of talking to the EU and seeing if we can do deals there, but obviously any deals we're doing with the EU aren't really landing, and the numbers keep coming.
Yeah, it's not working under Labour. Clearly, those levers that you've touched on potentially leave the ECHR, tear up the Human Rights Act, look again at the Refugee Convention and have a Rwanda Plan 2.0. Those clearly would be significant in helping Border Force to tackle this issue. But let's have a little bit of devil's advocate here, Tony. How convincing are the policies, the proposed policies of the opposition parties, the Conservatives and particularly Reform UK, in their plan to tackle the issue? Are you convinced? Are you buying what Nigel Farage or Kemi Badenoch are offering? Are you buying their goods?
So I think Reform need a bit of help. It's a very complicated business, Mark, and I have written a document, which I've read, which is on the right lines, but there is a very, significant legal and constitutional issue at stake here. I think the Conservatives have shifted since they, were actually, well, they were slaughtered, weren't they, in the last election?
Yeah.
Kemi Badenoch, I think, was a little bit on the fence for a little while, but I think the work that Chris Philp's been doing, Suella Braverman, Rob Jenrick, have now produced a very significant a package of measures, and they've looked at how we might extricate ourselves from ECHR, but not just that, how the legislative framework might change. I think there's been quite a lot of work done behind the scenes, which I think is pretty thorough on how we might do this, but it does mean a very, very radical change in political thinking, in that we are saying actually that anybody who arrives here from a safe third country will be detained actually, and they won't be admitted into our asylum system, they won't be allowed to claim protection, and they will be removed. And we really need to ramp up that removals. I think abolishing Rwanda was the biggest political error of our times in border security. We need something like that, as well as a big outreach effort on those countries that aren't cooperating with returns, and an absolute laser-like focus on removals. That's what's needed. And I think, that the Conservatives, one way or another, have been pushed in that direction. Mark, I hope that they may lose some of their middle ground supporters who don't support that sort of thing. Reform are saying the right things, but I think they need a little bit of help in actually refining exactly what their proposal is.
Would you offer your services to Nigel Farage by way of advice?
I'm happy to offer my services to anybody, Mark, and to do what I can to explain to people on your listeners about what's going on. I'd just like to emphasise that this is not the work of the Border Force. The Border Force have to work within the laws they are given, and they're not allowed to tell you, but I can tell you the laws they have given require that we act in the way we do. If the Border Force were allowed to detain and remove those people, then they certainly would do that, but it does need a fundamental reworking of the legislation framework that we now find ourselves with.
Tony, we always love having you on the show. Thank you for your valuable time. The former head of UK Border Force, Tony Smith, who I think is going to be getting a call from David Bull and even maybe Nigel Paul Farage later today. Folks, next up, is Rachel Reeves about to tear up a key manifesto pledge? That's next.
why people are frustrated, because the political system isn't responding to those needs. And we have things like, I mean, in Essex, where obviously the Bell Hotel in Epping was the kind of trigger for a lot of the protests initially in this country, and yet Essex was an area where elections were cancelled earlier this year, and they're being talked about being cancelled for next year. So if people don't have a democratic way of expressing themselves, and by voting for their local councillors and ultimately for their local MPs and trying to get a change of government, then you can see why they're doing
what do you
what
expect?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So many messages coming in. This from Darrell in Lincoln. Mark, listening to David Bull, the chairman of Reform UK, inspires a lot of confidence. Zia Youssef, Sarah Pochin, Richard Tice, they all speak normal common sense and explain things clearly without the flowery flannel of other parties. Anyone who can't see them as the way forward is blinkered. On immigration, Mary in Kent says, "Morning, Mark. My husband is from Galway in Ireland, and his family say that the city has changed unbelievably. The main boy's name now is Mohammed in the cities. It won't take many years before the Irish are the minority." Lynn in Essex, Mark, it was a national emergency, illegal immigration, when the first 100 people landed on our shores or in the backs of lorries. One person alone who has bad intentions towards the country could do colossal damage to us. The government are taking our lives and saying we don't matter. And Neil says, hello, Mark, the illegal immigration problem definitely is a national emergency. It became one when the intake exceeded the size of our army, which was several years ago. Neil, thank you for that. Keep your thoughts coming. But next up, should we do a bit of sport?
90 minutes in 90 seconds.
From The Sun.
And I'm delighted to welcome the Chelsea reporter of The Sun newspaper, Lloyd Canfield. Top of the morning, Lloyd.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Very well. And although I'm a Spurs fan, I have great affection for Nottingham Forest, an iconic English football club, and they've bounced back in the last 24 hours. Tell me more.
They have indeed. A 2-0 win over Porto was massive for them with their new manager, Sean Dyche. It was abysmal for Ange. He came to that grim end. After the Chelsea game that I was at, it was chaos as he got sacked after about 20 minutes after the final whistle. It was absolute madness. But Forest, it seems, are back under Sean Dyche. They're ready to go on their Europa League journey. They had a proven manager somewhat in Ange who could win the Europa League, and now they've turned to Sean Dyche to try and win that Europa League title.
Well, that's right. Ange was in post for a very short time. I don't think he won a single game, which means Tottenham will be actually quite comfortable with their decision to sack him last season.
I think so, yeah. And Spurs, they've got Thomas Frank now. He's obviously been really good for them so far. They look a defensively much more solid team. They still pose a threat going forwards. I think they're kind of still missing that real striker option, with Solanke missing most of the season so far. But things are looking good for Spurs as well, so you must be a happy man.
Most definitely. Lloyd, do you like a steak?
I like a steak, but I wish I had the steaks that Erling Haaland was eating. I might be a bit better at my 5
Yeah, tell us, who is Erling Haaland for those that are not across footy?
Sorry?
Remind us who he is for those who are not so football experts.
Well, up there with Harry Kane, who you probably will know. He's got to be probably the best striker in world football at the moment. 11 Premier League goals so far. He's leading the Premier League scoring standings by a significant margin, and it's apparently down to the steaks he's eating.
Well, that's it. Is that going to win City the Premier League? What about Chelsea, by the way? When are they going to start winning things again?
Who knows? I think it's been a long process for Chelsea so far in their hunt to get back to really winning the biggest titles. But they had a boost with the Club World Cup, and now they'll be going for the Premier League again. I spoke to Moises Caicedo and Reece James not too long ago. They seem aligned on the ambition that that's what they're going for. And with the other top teams seemingly dropping points more frequently than others. Maybe not Arsenal, they're going to be the other team right at the top this season, I think. But Chelsea will be back and they'll be looking to be in the running the next few seasons, I think.
Lloyd, I'll let you get stuck into that ribeye and we'll catch up soon. Lloyd Canfield, Chelsea reporter at The Sun #1 for sport exclusives. Listen, talking of exclusives, it's the understanding of Morning Glory that Rachel Reeves is now considering tearing up a manifesto commitment not to raise income tax. How politically dangerous is it? Is it inevitable? What's going to happen? Let's get the views of the sage of the city, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, top economist. Hello, Justin.
Good morning.
Rachel's painted herself into a corner, hasn't she, with the manifesto commitment not to raise income tax, VAT and national insurance on pay slips. Do you think she's going to do an about-turn here?
I think she's probably about the only thing she can really try and do is to actually sit there and say the world has changed and therefore I've got to change. Those commitments I made in the manifesto 2 years ago, I'm afraid, are now going to be different. It can be very embarrassing, but as I say, she's got to grow a couple of the things to be able to actually sit there and say I'm going to be strong enough to say times have changed, this is what we're going to have to do. Because she can muck around with taxation, little tax changes, all she likes. It's not going to make any difference. It'll be complicated and she'll get torn apart by everybody just trying to find other ways around it. Make it simple and straightforward. And I'm afraid for the rest of us, it's actually going to be painful in terms of having to pay income tax. But she's got to actually fill this hole somewhere, and also not just fill the hole. If I were her, I'd make it big to try and actually means she doesn't have to come back next year and do the same thing all over again. Then she can start talking about some real reforms, such as getting rid of stamp duty, making sure we get the economy going, making sure smaller businesses and the high-tech companies, where we are successful, give them the access to funds through proper financing, not government money, but actually through proper tax incentives for investors, and you can start to get things going again. That's what we need to do.
And we understand that the Chancellor's going to blame Brexit at the dispatch box when she delivers her budget. I mean, that was a vote that happened almost a decade ago. Clearly it was a bumpy transition and it has impacted trade to a certain extent. But, I mean, is she having a laugh that Brexit's the cause of our problems?
Yes, I have to say, leaping around for old ideas and things to look at, and we start blaming on all sorts of early things that might have happened decades ago. No.
The Falklands War, maybe. I think the Falklands did it. That's why we're struggling
but blame the Argentinians for this.
Yeah, I think the Suez Crisis still came at a price.
But if they
Battle of Hastings. Sorry, I'm on a roll now. Carry on.
The Normans could be quite good, actually. Actually, we are Normans. I don't know what we're on about. But the whole point is that actually she can actually look at the areas we're good at already, which we know are capable of growing. They need that vital word, confidence. How to get confidence back in the market, and that is, first of all, you go to the primary areas of the economy, which is the consumer. That's you and I going out and buying stuff. Now, short term, it's going to be very painful because income tax will probably go up. But if you were to address things like stamp duty, so you're buying and selling houses, therefore when you buy and sell, you're going to have to change the kitchen, the bathroom, and all those other bits and pieces. It puts more money through the economy, more spending, more people spending means more tax coming in, and, the speed of money through the economy.
There you go. Justin, listen, loved it. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who is a Norman just like the rest of us. Next up, a big royal exclusive.
Your Majesty, Melania and I are deeply grateful to you and Queen Camilla for your extraordinary graciousness. And to William and Kate, thank you so much. It's been so great being with you today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's a singular privilege to be the first American president welcomed here. The phrase special relationship, seen from American eyes, the word special does not begin to do it justice. We're joined by history and fate, and by love and language. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with you.
Security remains the cornerstone of this special relationship. We have the deepest, most advanced defense relationship in the world.
As I said last night, the bond between our countries is like no other anywhere in the world. The United States and the United Kingdom have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history.
We are working together to end the humanitarian catastrophe in the Middle East.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Morning Glory. A big hour to come. The time is exactly 3 minutes past 9. And it's the understanding of Morning Glory that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves is considering scrapping Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Will that be the final nail in the coffin of this Labour government? Meanwhile, Plaid Cymru win the Caerphilly by-election in Wales. Reform UK were hoping to snatch that seat. What went wrong? Were they the victims of tactical voting? And could tactical voting keep Nigel Farage out of power at the next election? Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to smash the gangs have been smashed to pieces with the abject failure of our one-in, one-out arrangement, which mastermind himself, David Lammy, says is a roaring success. So then we know it's not true. They've obviously failed to stop the boats. At current rates, we've calculated that 1/3 people will enter the country illegally in the course of this parliament. Is this now a national emergency? Also, an image of a white man in a smart suit harassing a woman on the train in an article for The Mirror has gone viral. Are the public being gaslit over who exactly the perpetrators are of harassment towards women? Plus, the King visits Rome and prays with the Pope, but was he praying that his brother Prince Andrew leaves the 30-bedroom Royal Lodge and gives up his remaining titles? I'll be asking the man who knows the monarch incredibly well, his former butler, Grant Harold, later in the show. Lots to get through. My priority is to get your opinions on the national radio and television airwaves. My number is 0344 499 1000. Book your place on the show. Tommy's on the phones today. And you can send us a text with the word talk in your message to 87222. You can drop us a voice note. And don't forget, you can hear us on the radio. You can watch the show. Just head over to YouTube, search Talk, and there we are. This is Morning Glory. Let's get to work. And so, humiliation for Labour as Plaid Cymru win the Caerphilly by-election, but the Conservatives, remember them, completely wiped off the political map in that constituency. Let's get reaction now from the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Matt Vickers MP. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Mark.
Clearly, the Conservatives were not in pole position in that race in Caerphilly, but were you disappointed by the sheer scale of the loss?
Well, I think there's a bit of context and reality check to go on there, isn't there? This is the Labour heartlands. This is a seat that had been held by Labour for 100 years. People use by-elections to send messages, and boy, have they sent a message to this Labour government. Labour moved down in its own heartlands to 3rd place. The people of Caerphilly are rightly knocked off at the state of our country, at the fact that there are 17% more people out of work, at the fact that inflation's doubled, at the fact Labour promised us they'd reduce our energy bills by 300 quid and they've gone up nearly 200 quid. They're knocked about what they've done to our farmers, what they've done to our pensioners, and the right royal mess that they're making of our economy.
However, is coming forth a truly unedifying sight for the most successful political party in the history of Western democracy?
I think people make decisions in by-elections. I mean, the reality is, if we go back a few years, there was a point when the Liberal Democrats were snapping up all the by-election seats. They didn't go on to form a government. We've got to be amongst it. Do you know what? We got a good kick in the general election last year. We've gone away. We've listened to what people had to say. We've took that message. In Wales, it was obviously a really tough night. We lost all of our MPs in Wales, but we're back. We're looking at what people have had to say. We're bringing that pitch forwards. We've got a new leader. We've got a great team, actually, leading our party, and we're putting that offer out there, whether it be axing stamp duty, which is the biggest drag on our economy. It's the IFS have said it drags on our economy. It prevents people moving. It prevents social mobility. It stops people getting a bigger house when they get kids. It stops them downsizing. We've said we're going to do that. It could be game-changing for our economy. We've also said, as always, we're the people who will be fiscally responsible. We're the people who usually come in after Labour to clean up the mess, to ensure that we're on the side of the people who work hard, who do the right thing, who create jobs, who deliver economic growth. That's exactly what we're going to do again. We're going to ensure that this country lives within its means and that the people who pay taxes know they're going to worthwhile causes, supporting them with public services.
What would you say to my viewers and listeners who take the view that they've voted Conservative in the past, but given the net zero zealotry, the opening of the borders, the illiberal COVID lockdowns, the enormous rises in taxes, that they cannot trust the Tories ever again?
Well, I think I would tell them to look at our new leader, look at our new offering. Kemi has said that we got things wrong in office. We've looked at, for instance, net zero and what we need to do on that front. We've said that the reality is you need to balance these things. We shouldn't be opposed to being greener and cleaner, particularly when there's great jobs in it. In my part of the world, we're getting hundreds of jobs created by SEA, who are creating wind monopiles for wind turbines. There are opportunities to be green, but we've got to do it in a way that suits people, that helps people either save money or doesn't cost them ridiculous amounts of money. So that's what we said on net zero. On borders, we've said we will leave the ECHR. While there's lots of parties tweeting lots of things and giving you lots of back of fag packet ideas, we've done the work. We've had leading cases put together a plan. We will leave the ECHR, we will disapply the Human Rights Act from cases of deportation and immigration, and we will do the one thing that everybody knows we need to do to solve this border crisis. And people who come here need to know they will not be allowed to stay, and that's what we're going to do.
Hey, I mean, I think that it was a good conference for the Tories, but lots of my viewers and listeners will think it's too little too late, but I do think that your party is moving in the right direction. How do you solve a problem like Nigel Farage?
I think the biggest single problem that is facing this country at the moment, and is going to face us by the time of the next election, we've seen what's happening to our economy. Inflation virtually doubled. That means everything is going up at almost twice the price. Ridiculous increases in prices on everything. We're seeing companies close at the fastest rate since the world economic crash. Our high streets are being absolutely battered. We are the guys who come in and do it properly. Whether it be welfare, we want to see welfare, well, we want to see it, fair. We want to see people getting value for money from the taxes. We need to see that welfare bill brought down. What's Nigel Farage offering on that front? He's offering lots of huge spending commitments. He's offering to nationalise things. He's suggesting that we should remove the two-child cap, that people who are on benefits shouldn't have to make those choices about how many children they have, because it should be picked up by taxpayers who are having to make those choices themselves. We'll be on the side of the people who work hard, who do the right thing. We'll sort this economy out so it works for people who are out there earning a living, trying to create that economic growth and jobs.
Now, of course, Reform are very clear that their scrapping of the two-child benefit cap would not be unilateral. It would be targeted towards working families. But I take your point. And what about you yourself, your own position? You're the deputy chair of the party. There has been a brain drain from the Conservatives over to Reform UK. Matt, on Morning Glory, can you categorically rule out yourself defecting to Reform before the next election?
I can rule that out. I'm here with this party. We're making our pitch. I know that the British people need the Conservative Party. We're the people who come in and tidy up the mess. Every Labour government in history It leaves office with more people out of work than when they arrive, and every time it's the Conservatives who need to come in, back business, support them. These ridiculous taxes that are applying to business, the jobs tax, the slashing of small business rates relief, this ridiculous red tape monster that is the Employment Rights Bill is costing people their jobs. And those aren't just numbers, those are people's lives, these are people's aspirations, their opportunities, their ability to provide for the family. But not only are they taking that away from people, they're putting those people onto the welfare system, costing more taxpayers more money. It is a disaster, and the Conservatives will need to be there at the next election to tidy it up.
Now, Matt, you are a highly respected figure. You are a red-blooded Conservative to your core. That's very, very clear. You're ideologically consistent. Why did your party become so left-wing in office?
Oh, you're very polite, aren't you? I think, do you know what? I think we're a government of our time. You have to look at, we talk about public spending, we know why. Why did we have to increase public spending recently? Because we had this pandemic that caused lots of heartache, had huge costs involved. But what we did during that pandemic was we supported small businesses. I speak to businesses in my constituency now who tell me they're still grateful for the money received because they know they wouldn't be here without it. Many of them are now facing the storm of a Labour government. The problem was that lots of people had forgot how bad Labour is for our economy. They forgot the fact that everybody loses their job. They forgot they made it impossible for people to run a business. They forgot that they see more shutters go up in high streets than ever before. The Conservatives promising to axe business rates for those leisure, hospitality, retail businesses in our high street, looking again at how we support people who are doing the right thing.
Matt, a delight to have you on the show. Do join us again in the near future. My thanks to the Deputy Party Chair of the Conservatives, Deputy Tory Party Chairman, Matt Vickers MP. Your reaction, are you buying what the Tories are selling? 03444991000. Will you ever forgive? Or is it reform all the way? Here is a voice note on the subject of breakfast clubs. Is it the government's job to feed our kids? Take a listen to Ellie. Elle.
I was a single parent from when my girls were 10 and 12. I worked full time. I got them to school in my car every day before going to work myself. I used to go around to all the cheaper shops and buy things like pasta, which is really cheap, and all that kind of stuff. So then I used to make dinners, lunches for them as well. I'd be cooking onions and turmeric and spices and stuff and mixing it on the pasta with onion and things like that for £1, and they'd go to school with that, and all the other kids would go, oh, what have you got? That smells so nice. So the things that I used to make, I used to send them to school with for lunch as well, used to cost me about £1 for 2 or 3 days worth. So you can do it if you want to do it. These people are just lazy. And how much does a loaf of value bread cost? I think it used to be about 28p or 17p for a loaf of bread. It's ridiculous, see people not feeding their kids.
Elle, what a brilliant call. And I think you can get a basic sort of white loaf now for 60 or 70p in the right supermarket. I completely agree. We need to actually teach kids how to feed themselves at school. Remember home economics? Anyway, Elle, what a great message. And I know you're busy, so I'm delighted that you took time to reach out to us on that one, as has Steve in Cornwall, in regards to the loss of Caerphilly by Labour in the by-election yesterday. Stephen says, hi Mark, the one thing the by-election has shown us is that 350 Labour MPs had better join a job-seeking site. All those MPs will now be more worried about having to apply for job seekers allowance within the next few years than winning the next election. Steve, thank you for that. Rachel Reeves is now in a financial corner. She's considering tearing up a manifesto pledge to raise income tax. Let's crunch the numbers now. What kind of a state is the country in? How broke is Britain? Who better to ask than a very old friend of mine who talked a lot of sense during the pandemic, independent statistician Jamie Jenkins. Hello, Jamie. Long time no see.
Yeah, good morning, Mark. You doing okay?
I'm very, very well indeed. What for you are the headline figures which spell doom for the economy?
Yeah, so you've only got to look at this month's borrowing figures, Mark. So £20 billion borrowed in the month of September. And if you take the first 6 months of the government's fiscal year, that's £100 billion, huge amounts. It's above forecast, and the forecast was uprated by the OBR because of the poor borrowing figures that we saw last year. So significant amounts of borrowing. And the big challenge we've got with the borrowing figures, which is why Rachel Reeves is looking to try and perhaps look in to find some more taxes, is that because the government's lost control of inflation, and part of the reason inflation's higher than some other countries is because of the Labour's job tax. When inflation goes up, a huge chunk of the government borrowing is on kind of gilts, which are linked to inflation. So we can see that the borrowing figures are going up because inflation's going up, which means people get bigger returns, which costs the taxpayer money. The public sector pay bills going through the roof because of the deals they've done with the unions. That's gone up as well. So ultimately, the Labour's policies themselves have caused higher borrowing. So when the Chancellor's looking to increase taxes to cover the black hole that she might have created herself, it's not a very good look, and it's not really fair on the British public.
And you can't win an arms race with inflation, can you?
No, and the only way you're really going to get inflation down is to stop having kind of these big pay rising, for the public sector. A key thing when you look at the public sector pay, and we've got obviously the doctors, the junior doctors are talking about going on strike. They want even more money themselves, Mark, is that if you look at private sector wages, they're going up about 4.9% at the moment. Public sector wages are going up about 6.7%. So that gap, if you translate that gap between public and private sector pay over a course of an annual figure, that costs us more money, £5.5 billion extra, which is more borrowing. So all the things that Rachel Reeves is borrowing money for is why there's this talk of this increase in the income tax. Wouldn't surprise me if they break a manifesto pledge, Mark, because most of what they've done since they come in, they didn't promise in the first place anyway. Look at digital ID. That's another example, not in the manifesto, on the table.
Most definitely. How do you see this panning out for my viewers and listeners in the economy in let's say, the next sort of year to 2 years?
It's not looking great. We've seen the IMF, all forecasts are generally wrong, Mark, but we've seen the IMF have looked at, when you look at GDP per head, we're going to be one of the lowest next year in the G7. So it's not panning out very well. And you've only got to look in where I am in Wales and the figures that have come out overnight on the Caerphilly by-election. Labour, it was one of their heartlands. I'm in the Welsh Valleys. They've dominated. And I think people are voting. It's a Senedd Welsh election, but people are voting with intentions of what they're seeing at Westminster as well. And I think the election that we've seen, and when you look at the way the economy's running, is Keir Starmer's finished. You cannot sustain this because this isn't a council election. This is basically a national parliament election in Wales, in their heartlands, and the voters are voting, basically, they want them gone.
Really good to see you again, Jamie. Can I urge all of you to actually go to Substack and have a look at Jamie's excellent journalism there? Okay, Stats Jamie is his X handle. But if you go to substack.co.uk and just Google Stat of the Nation, you'll find his words of wisdom there. He really is quite a sage on all matters statistics. Jamie, thanks for your time. Jamie Jenkins there. Now, folks, next up, this is a truly shocking story. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So an image of a white man in a very smart suit harassing a woman on the train was used in an article for a Mirror newspaper piece about harassment towards women. So it's gone viral, which begs the question, are the public being gaslit over who exactly the perpetrators are of harassment towards women? We'll discuss that next.
in Afghanistan, Andrew, they've come up with a new burqa. They've decided that being able to see both of a woman's eyes is too sexually provocative.
Really?
So there's a new one with only one eye, which is unbelievable. But I think, I'm uncomfortable about telling any woman what they should and shouldn't wear.
Absolutely.
But I'm not convinced. Women say, well, we decide to wear these burqas. It's like, well, do you?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, just a few minutes ago, I was joined by the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Matt Vickers MP. Are you buying what the Tories are selling at the moment? Chris is not having it. Good morning, Mark. Matt Vickers says it all but means nothing. 14 years they did nothing at all. They're now out of office saying they should have done things differently. They're liars, all of them. The Tories, like Labour, are finished, and I am now a Reform member, says Chris. Now, what about this for a story? An image of a white man in a very smart suit harassing a woman on a train in an article for the Mirror newspaper has gone viral. So are the public being gaslit over who exactly the perpetrators of harassment towards women are? Let's get the views of the brilliant writer and trade unionist Paul Embury. Hello, Paul.
Good morning, Mark.
I think I saw on your X feed when you responded to this yesterday, "Here we go again," or something of that flavour.
Yeah, it's becoming a phenomenon that's really now, I think, impossible to ignore, isn't it? When you look at our creative and cultural industries in this country, they usually want diversity in everything, to the point now, frankly, where what we see pumped out by those industries in terms of TV and entertainment and marketing, advertising and so on, is often very unreflective of the world or the country that we live in. But there's an exception, isn't there? Whenever there's a criminal or some other wrongdoer to be depicted, it's usually almost exclusively a white person. And I think you would have to be blind not to notice that now. And I think most people really, Mark, are of the view, look, it's absolutely right that we have minority ethnic people represented in our creative and cultural industries. What sort of person would say they shouldn't be represented? But it has become, frankly, now a relentless political lecture. It's so noticeable, and I think many people are finding it quite tedious.
Well, that's right. And this is an innocuous post on the Mirror's Twitter feed. It shouldn't have gone viral, but it has, for good reason. And in fact, this has gone viral globally. I think sort of 8 or 9 million people have now seen this, for good reason.
Yes, because I think it conflicts with people's everyday experiences, and it conflicts with the reality of people's lives. You know, we invest a lot these days, don't we, in what we call people's lived experience.
Yeah.
But when it comes to stuff like this, the stuff that's being churned out by our creative and cultural industries and parts of our media, lived experience is irrelevant. It's almost like they're trying to force a particular political message down your neck. I did a piece of research, actually, for a piece that I wrote on my Substack, where I looked at all of the different anti-sexual harassment videos that were being published by our charities, our NGOs, local councils, political institutions, and so on. And of over something like 30 offenders who were depicted in those videos, almost every one of them was white. And that's particularly striking when you know, and this was data that was released recently by the Centre for Migration Control, that actually a strikingly high proportion of people in this country who commit sexual offences are foreign nationals. Now, I know people will be uncomfortable when we speak that truth, but we have to. It's an inconvenient truth for some people. But we have to be in the business of speaking facts rather than just speaking propaganda. And it's almost like they treat us as mugs, these industries. They kind of think we can't know the truth. We have to see a world on TV, in dramas, in advertising, that isn't reality because, you know, we have to receive a certain political message. That's what most people feel, I think.
And this is not about demonising minorities at all, does it? And you and I both, you know, Paul, know plenty of disgusting white British men who commit the most appalling crimes. But you mentioned the statistics, and we just have to have an honest conversation about the fact that a good portion of foreign-born men that come to this country have a very different attitude towards women.
Yes, and you know, as I said before, we have to be in the business of speaking inconvenient truths, because if you're not prepared to do that, then ultimately you're not going to face the challenges that are presented in society, and you're not going to give yourself the best opportunity of tackling some of the wrongdoing that goes on if you just want to mask what's really happening. And we've kind of seen that with the grooming gang scandal. Recent years, haven't we, where people shied away from asking the really difficult questions about the ethnic and cultural background of some of those people who were committing those crimes. People didn't want to join the doxing authority because they thought that, you know, it would inflame community tensions and all the rest of it. Well, it inflames community tensions when people on the ground can see authorities not dealing with issues and shying away from hard truths because they've got a particular political agenda to follow. So in the end, they actually end up making the situation much worse than it is.
Well, I've got you, Paul. Oxford University has been accused of social engineering because black applicants who miss their required A-level grades are more likely to be accepted than white candidates, according to the Telegraph newspaper. Over the last 5 years, 16% of black UK undergraduates who went to Oxford had failed to achieve the grades specified when they were offered a place. This is from the Telegraph Freedom of Information request. Now, that is more than twice as high as the figure for white UK applicants, which is 6%, and only 2% of Chinese applicants who live in Britain were accepted after failing in their exams. This is against meritocracy and surely not befitting for an elite academic institution like Oxford.
And it's not just a coincidence. I think we can be pretty sure about that. I think there are political forces at work in Oxford University and have been for some years. And, you know, the truth is some people call this reverse racism. We shouldn't use the word reverse. It's just straightforward racism. If people, whether they're white or Chinese or whatever, are being put at a disadvantage simply on the grounds of the colour of their skin, then again, we have to call it out. What I find really dispiriting, Mark, is how we've kind of moved away from the Martin Luther King injunction, which was that we should treat people on the basis of the content of their character and not the colour of their skin. That seems to me to be absolutely the best way to approach social questions and political questions. Instead of that, we seem these days to be doing the complete opposite, and it's creating its own grotesque injustices, which now are all around us, frankly.
Yes, if you look at the ideology being peddled within some of Britain's elite universities, does it make you worry for the future, Paul?
To a degree, yeah. And I don't think it's just universities. I don't think I've ever known a time where our political and educational and cultural institutions, local and national institutions, have forfeited so much of the trust of the public. Most of them have kind of embraced this agenda of radical progressivism, which out there in the country is a fringe agenda and most people are not signed up to. And because of that, I think a chasm has emerged in the worldview between those people who run those institutions and ordinary people out on the street. And it's no wonder that we're seeing some of the political earthquakes in our country over recent years that we're seeing. I think all roads lead back to that.
Before I let you go, a very good post on your X feed, by the way, at Paul Embury, if you want to hear Paul's words of wisdom. Reform's vote in Caerphilly surged from 1.7% to 36%. Labour's plummeted from 46% to 11%. A Labour member of the Welsh Parliament just told another radio station that Labour lost so heavily because it wasn't strong enough in its support for refugees and the Nation of Sanctuary initiative. You've described that view as utterly delusional.
Well, as I was saying a moment ago, you know, people in authority, particularly on the left, I have to say, my spectrum of politics, have to face some hard truths. They can't just keep peddling things that are blatantly untrue and that people, when they hear them, know to be blatantly untrue. This is completely delusional to say that if only the Labour Party, whether in Wales or elsewhere, were to adopt a more kind of radical and progressive line on issues such as immigration and asylum and refugees, then all of those votes that they are losing would start flooding back. If the Labour Party isn't prepared to face up to the real reasons why so many millions, particularly of working class voters, have deserted it over recent years, then frankly it's going to deserve to lose.
Lovely to see you again, Paul. My thanks to Paul Embry, trade unionist and writer. Your reaction, 0344 499 1000. Well, a big 24 hours for the King. He's been to Rome and he's been praying with the Pope. But is he praying for a solution to his rather disgraced brother, Prince Andrew? I'll get the views of a man that knows the King intimately well, his former butler, Grant Harold, next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just how much trouble are we in with the economy? Rachel Reeves, it's the understanding of Morning Glory, is considering tearing up a manifesto pledge not to raise income tax. Here's a voice note from Joanne.
Morning, Mark. Joanne from Norfolk. So, the budget. It's funny how they don't remember what they did back in 2010 when they left the coffers empty. And obviously the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition had to try and resolve the issues. Blaming Brexit. Brexit's not at fault. Brexit wasn't done properly. They never wanted to do Brexit properly. The deal they did was bad. So to blame Brexit, she never came in on that ticket that Brexit was to blame. Last year it was the Conservatives, now it's Brexit. I mean, come on, let's be fair. This is ridiculous. And as for breakfast clubs, the first priority of any family is to pay for the food on their children's table and to put a roof over their head. And if they can't do that, they shouldn't have children in the first place.
Love that voice note. Joanne, I can hear you're busy too. Thanks for making the time to share your views. Keep them coming. This from Chris. Regarding this Daily Mirror newspaper article in which a very smartly dressed white man is harassing a woman on the train. Chris says it's not just this story where we're being gaslit. The BBC has taken to posting predominantly white men when convicted of sexual offences, yet are not posting men of other ethnic origins who are guilty of the same crime. Other news outlets seem to be following, it seems, as an attempt to distract the public from what's going on. The government is using the news outlets as a weapon. Well, let's move to matters royal now. A very big moment as King Charles goes to Rome and prays with the Pope. Let's get reaction from a man who knows King Charles intimately well, the former royal butler, Grant Harold. Hello, Grant.
Good morning.
Grant, first of all, this is a significant moment, isn't it, for the monarch and the pontiff to worship together?
It really is. I mean, do you know, I think it's been said it's over 500 years now. From my little bit of going back to my knowledge of history, I think it goes back to the time of Charles I, you know, where obviously due to religion, we almost, we did lose the monarchy. And then, you know, Charles II brought it back. So it's always been a very, can I say, a bit of a tricky subject when it comes to the monarchy and religion. Yeah. But it shows you how much times have thankfully moved on. And, you know, obviously Queen Camilla is a Catholic. That was a huge thing, obviously, when they got married. That, I don't know if you remember, that was one of the kind of discussions about divorcee and Catholic and everything.
Sure.
And what's great is it shows you the kind of man the king is, because he's a very, very, even though he's very traditional, as we know, he's very modern in his approach to things. This is a perfect example by doing this.
Do you think that the issues around his brother Prince Andrew have tested his faith?
I think they would test anyone's faith, to be honest with you. I really feel for him because, like his mother, he is a family man. He's, you know, family is a very big part of his life. But also like his mother, the monarchy is everything. And what I mean by that is he will see it as his job to protect it and to ensure that it carries on and it's passed on to his son. Obviously, with what's happened with Prince Andrew is not the kind of what's even the palace has said, I believe. You know, they want to move away, not move away, but they want to focus on the work that the royal family do from the positive kind of side of things. And I think this is where it's very tricky for the king, because he's trying to get it right. He's still obviously fighting cancer. He's trying to do the right thing, and then there's all these setbacks that seem to keep kind of. It's extraordinary when you think about what's happened in his short reign so far. And, you know, the late Queen, thankfully, had a reign where, you know, things obviously happened and things, of course, things went wrong. But, I mean, the king seems to be getting everything thrown at him just now.
Most definitely. He waited so long to become monarch, and he's been presented with so many problems, not of his making, Grant. As you said, overall, he's a decent man. You've written an amazing book, which has become an instant bestseller. It's called The Royal Butler, My Remarkable Life in Royal Service. What was your perception of Prince Andrew at the time when you were in the palace?
You know, just to mention that, it's really interesting. A lot of people have actually said to me, what's been nice is getting to hear about the family. We all think we know the family, even I did as a youngster, watching the documentaries and things about them. But it's interesting getting people's views, saying how it's given them a positive, I'll quickly add a positive insight into what they're like. Prince Andrew, see, what I remember, I didn't have very much to do with him, but what I do remember, he wasn't rude to me. I will make that very clear, but he was also a little bit dismissive. And what I mean by that was, it was almost like you're there as a butler, you're there as a staff member.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of feeling I got. I said he was very polite. He wasn't rude in any kind of way, but it was very dismissive. And he was the only family member that was like that. And when I discussed it with other colleagues at the time, they said, well, that's what he's like, that's him. And I've never really had any, it's very sad, I've never had any kind of positive feedback from when you speak to other staff members, even now, when you can have conversations, and never anything very positive, which is sad, because, you know, I don't really understand why why he's like that. And I don't know, maybe it's just his upbringing, maybe it's I don't know. You never really know. And an interesting comment I saw the other day is somebody was talking about his mental health, and quite rightly, and I know of course it's awful and it's wrong what he's done or what we think he's done. But at the end of the day, he's still a human being. He does have mental health, and this will absolutely. So I do feel for him on that side, because knowing people that have suffered mental health and how things, even through our own doing, how it can affect you. That's the only thing that's a little bit worrying, because I think that's the thing we all forget is he is a human being, and sadly, we do make mistakes. Humans make mistakes.
Most definitely, and actually that sort of chimes with a very good piece by Annabelle Denham in The Telegraph this week. Am I the only one feeling sorry for Prince Andrew? He's clearly a man of poor judgment. As you mentioned, he's quite haughty, quite dismissive of those serving him in a capacity such as a butler. But in the end, as you say, he's a human being, and he'll be in a dark place at the moment. Do you think there's a bit too much of a feeding frenzy around this man, given that he's been convicted of no crime?
Well, this is the thing. He hasn't been convicted. It's a really difficult one, Matt, because, everyone looks at him and kind of... do you know what I think it is? I think it goes back to that interview, and where obviously, there's a lot of kind of evidence to say that he wasn't being, very obvious evidence that he wasn't being kind of truthful. And that's what people, and they're hearing all these kind of negative things, and it's making this kind of, people kind of now hating on him because of it. And I think that's the problem. And as I said, I don't, I think it's, if there's any, the evidence that's coming out is awful. And if he is convicted, of course, that would be horrendous. But all I'm trying to say is that, it's that thing where you're innocent until proven guilty, even though it's not looking good at all. But I think from a mental health point of view, I think that's why his mother was so protective of him, because he's been brought up in a very, interesting world. That's how I word it. It's not the kind of royal family. The world that they're brought up in it's very different. And I think that can affect, of course it can affect people. I really do. And I think maybe, the time that he was brought up, it was a very different royal family. Maybe nobody ever said no. That's a possibility, and sadly, it's kind of made the person that he is. But I do feel sorry, but at the same time, I'm sure he's probably thinking, why did I ever do or say the things that I did?
Now, of course, Andrew can never cease to be the brother of King Charles. He's a family member. Blood is thicker than water. We know that, Grant Harold. You've got a black sheep in every family. I might be the black sheep of my family. Who knows? You'll have to ask my siblings and my dear mother. But there are other levers that King Charles can pull. And one would be a letters patent, an act of Parliament, which removes the Duke of York title officially and, of course, strips him of the title Prince. Do you think that we might wind up in that place at a certain point?
Do you know, at the moment, no, because what he's done is shown that obviously he realised the seriousness of what's going on by not using those titles, which, and again, I've noticed a lot of comments, quite rightly, from the people of York. There's a lot of strong feeling up there about this, which you can understand. Now, if things, continue to go south for him and there's more evidence and this kind of thing, then I think that will be a discussion. I really do, because Queen Elizabeth changed the letters patent for her great-grandchildren. George V was the one that obviously made it accessible to grandchildren. So royals have got the power of doing it. It's an act of Parliament to change it. It's not impossible. But then, Matt, that then opens up the question, because if they're going to start changing the patent, which is HRH, are they then going to look at other family members, without giving any names just now, but are they going to look at other family members?
Anyone living in California, for example?
Well, I don't see them doing this. I think if they're going to do it, I think rather than just pick one person, there might be some new law or rule to do with letters patent that's brought in. For example, if you're not working as a member of the royal family, you don't have them. There could be something they could be working on behind the scenes, which could therefore see, even if he's not found guilty or anything, it could just be the way forward. Because remember, William wants to make the royal family smaller, and I think he would be behind something like that, definitely, of making the royal family not only smaller, but also limiting who can call themselves HRH.
Well, that might be a politically convenient way of dealing with the Harry problem, because if you had a sort of blanket ban on anyone that wasn't a serving royal from having the prince or princess title, then it wouldn't look like he was victimising any one individual, but clearly Harry would be Harry would be suffering the consequences. I'm not sure he'd enjoy being Harry Mountbatten Windsor, but that's another story. And what about the other issue for the King and Andrew, which is the optics of Andrew living in the 30-room Royal Lodge, which is pretty close by to what we understand to be Prince William's forever home, the Forest Lodge, pretty nearby.
Yes.
You can't really have a future king of the United Kingdom living in a smaller house than his disgraced uncle.
No, and just go back quickly to the Harry thing. When you mentioned Mountbatten Windsor, I wonder if it'll be Harry Markle, but we'll come back to that.
Wow, Harry Markle. Well, we know Meghan would like that. That would be the ultimate victory, wouldn't it?
Well, you never know. Some husbands do take the wives' names.
Harry Markle, that's genius.
I was going to quickly say Royal Lodge. You're quite right. It's a huge house. The tricky part is, Matt, that it's putting aside everything that's going on, which, you know, I'm not trying to put it aside, but just looking at the facts, the lease that was done, like if you lease a house, anyone leases a house, you can obviously get long lets. And I believe his is, and this is a guess, I think it was 75 years or something at the time, which goes on maybe to 2075, maybe that's what it was. But it's obviously throughout his lifetime. And it's a peppercorn rent, which is basically, for all we know, it could even be £1. It could be that simple. Yeah. And this is what everyone's trying to find out, is what is the deal that's been done? Because they're saying he shouldn't have that deal. This is a really tricky one, because to my mind, this is completely set. This is to do with his living, his expenses, what he spends money on. It's up to him where he rents. It's up to him, well, it's up to the landlords what they charge him. I doubt, that, you know, Wine probably feels that a peppercorn rent isn't probably fair, but then that was something that was done in the time of his grandmother. And I don't know, again, how easy is that to change. But you're right. I think there's a lot of people going to be questioning why a future king is living in a smaller residence where his uncle is in this massive house. So it's possible that again, you might find that he might decide to give it up and move into something smaller. Who knows? I mean, at the moment, the future for him is so, kind of bleak, and it's not getting any better.
It most definitely isn't. Grant Harold's book is called The Royal Butler, My Remarkable Life in Royal Service. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Brilliant stuff. Are you sympathetic to the King? How do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? I don't think it's appropriate that he's a prince, because when you call someone prince, you are showing them respect. It's a venerated title. Surely he doesn't deserve that. We'll get to your calls, messages and much besides straight after this.
If your way of dealing with a bunch of ravenous wolves is to throw a vast amount of steak on the ground, you will find that they stop chasing you for a bit. And whereas Streeting's been saying, oh, look, we've
solved this. Unlike the Tories, we've solved this, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for a few months, things, the reduction in waiting lists, which was happening under the Conservatives, I might add, continued. And now for the last 3 months, it's gone into reverse. And the ravenous wolves, if you throw them a load of meat, funnily enough, they come after you with even greater intent.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, thank you so much for looking after me this morning. Didn't expect to be looking after Morning Glory today. It's been great to have your company. Thanks for all of the interaction. Don't forget, I'm back for Talk Breakfast this weekend, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Do hope you'll join me. There'll be lots to come, including some big name voices on all matters political and beyond. And Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. sharp every Saturday and Sunday morning. Alex says, Mark, Paul Embury, your guest, should know full well about discrimination against the white population. My son applied to join the fire service and was rejected 3 times. He found out that his pass mark was 70%. All other DEI candidates had a pass mark of 60%. Alex in Solihull. Alex, that should simply be illegal. Diversity is anything but based on these policies. Reform UK, are they the finished article? This is a voice note from Wayne.
All right, Mark. So, reform, scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. I think that's a fantastic idea. However, it comes with a caveat, in my opinion. If you're in work and you're earning X amount of pounds, then yes, you qualify. Because ultimately, what we don't want to do is have a generation like we had under Labour back from 1997 onwards, where it was more affordable for a single mum to keep getting pregnant so she can stay on benefits for at least another 16 to 18 years than it was to go to work. So you're rewarding those who are using their children as cash cows rather than installing the family institution.
What a brilliant voice note. Wayne, very well put. Couldn't have put it better myself. Big political news. Plaid Cymru pipped Reform UK to the post to win the Caerphilly by-election yesterday. Was the chairman of Reform UK, David Bull, disappointed? That's what I asked him earlier.
To be honest, yes, of course, slightly disappointed, but I also think we have to put this into context. We have done remarkably well. Look, 4 years ago, we were polling at 1.7%, and last night, or this morning, we got 36%. That is a meteoric rise by any kind of metric. Actually, I think that's pretty unparalleled in modern British political history. So we did extremely well. Of course, we are disappointed not to do that. But what it does show, when you look at those figures, Labour absolutely decimated, going down to 11%, and the Tories wiped off the board. Quite frankly, they might as well pack up and go home at 2%. But what we are seeing in Wales, and I can see this replicated around the United Kingdom. I'm going on my chairman's tour. I've seen 5,000 people in the last 4 months. Now, 2 days ago, I was in Liverpool, again, a traditionally Labour stronghold. Now, the Labour vote there has collapsed from 83% down to 42%, so it's halved. Since Keir Starmer came in, they've lost 20% of their vote, and that is what we are seeing across the board. In Wales, generally, we're polling at 28%. In Scotland at 22%, and in the rest of the United Kingdom, when you take it as an aggregate, at 36%. If there was a general election tomorrow, that means that Reform UK becomes the party of government. We would have an astonishing 445 members of Parliament, a whopping majority. And I think what that says, and I know this from the talkTV viewers as well, is that actually, and I said this last night, this is a last chance saloon to save this once great country. And that is why people are saying, I am sick and tired of the two-party politics and we need something different. And that's what we saw in Wales. This was a two-horse race between Plaid and us. Yes, we didn't win, but next time we will.
Is there a concern that the perception of the party is that it's the party of England?
No, I don't think so at all. And that's reflected by how well we're doing in Wales and Scotland as well. These are very difficult areas for us, tribally and traditionally, but actually across the country, people are saying they're sick and tired. The number one issue across the country, across the United Kingdom, is immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. People are sick and tired of...
Well, let me tell you, that was a fascinating interview with David Bull. A big reaction, and thank you so much for all of your comments about that and the rest of the last 4 hours. We've got a big 3 hours to come in the more than capable hands of Kevin O'Sullivan. Hello, Kevin.
What am I doing here? It's the daytime. I'm a creature of the night.
I know, that's exactly... You've got sunglasses on and everything to protect you from...
Well, these are... They change according to the sun anyway. So.
Kevin, it's very exciting to have you on mid-morning, and I know you've got quite a few things in your inbox, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to cover all the big stories that you've been covering. Of course, Labour's humiliation in Wales, Nigel Farage signalling support for a burqa ban. Yeah. David Lammy, this incredible statement that the one-in, one-out scheme is working a treat. I think he needs psychiatric help. I really do.
If we were a nightclub, right, one in, one out, we'd have been shut down by now. We'd have lost our licence as a country.
Exactly. It's just a joke. It's an absolute joke. Now they want to expand it. I mean, unbelievable. Yeah. So all that, and of course the grooming gang scandal, which is becoming a whole new scandal. The delay to this, not starting until next year. And whatever Jess Phillips says, the victims can't stand her. They want her.
Well, she's had the dreaded vote of confidence from number 10. Yeah. We know about Premier League football that it's game over. I think that you said that on X yesterday.
Exactly right. Yes, it's like getting a football manager getting the vote of confidence from the directors.
Yeah, or is it the same as a pat on the back from the boss here at Talk?
Well, let's not go there. But I tell you what, I'm going to focus on, slightly off-piste, but I did a story on my show last night, The Political Asylum, 7 to 10, Monday to Friday. Don't miss it, everybody. And I'm going to revisit it. It's extraordinary. It's the ongoing farce, I think, of foreign aid. Do you know? So Rachel Reeves is about to tax the